Chapter 1200. Before the dynasties of Xia, Shang and Zhou were established, human beings had always been living in tribes. These tribes were scattered in different areas, but they all had one thing in common, that was worshipping totems. Almost every tribe had a different totem. For example, the legendary 4 fierce beasts were totems. Chaos, Qiong Qi, Tao Wu and Tao Tai were the totems of the 4 tribes, which were defeated by Emperor Shun and exiled to different areas. After all, ever since Goddess Nviwa created human beings had been at the bottom of the food chain in the prehistorical world. Even though they were born with great fortune and had Goddess Nviwa behind their backs, before the rise of human beings, they were nothing but food in the eyes of many prehistorical creatures. Even before the Great War of Magi Demon Dynasty, the humankind had been in an awkward position. Back then, spirit creatures felt that human beings were too weak to be mentioned in the same breath as spirit creatures. Even though human beings were created by Goddess Nviwa, the only spirit creature in the world, spirit creatures still didn't treat human beings nicely. The Wu clan's attitude towards human beings was even worse. After all, under Hongjuan's instigation, the Wu clan and the Wu clan were absolutely irreconcilable. In the Wu clan's eyes, human beings were created by Goddess Nviwa. No matter whether spirit creatures were willing to admit it or not, they all believed that human beings were part of the spirit creatures. During the war against the spirit creatures, the Wu clan had destroyed countless human clans. They were extremely weak. Not to mention the powerful beings in the prehistorical era, even the ferocious beasts in the prehistorical era without intelligence could easily destroy one human clan after another. In addition, human beings also had to fight against the harsh ecological environment. Almost every second, countless human beings died. However, no matter how hard human beings tried, they could not avoid falling to the bottom of the food chain in the prehistorical era. Therefore, in order to survive, human beings had to change. Some human clans began to worship ferocious beasts and spirit beasts on their own initiative, carving their images on rock walls and animal skins. When they couldn't even fill their stomachs, they still had to prepare a large number of offerings to please these worshipped creatures. Lin Yuan once heard a saying, "If 20 people with different abilities and personalities were locked up in an apartment and then tried to make them fight each other, the one who survived to the end might not be the strongest or the wisest. Instead, it would be the one who could adapt to the environment and make changes the quickest." As it turned out, those clans who chose to worship totems all survived, and after the Great War of Magi Demon Dynasty, they quickly became the mainstream species in the prehistorical world. At the beginning, there were many totems, and the last winner was the Huaxia clan, whose totem was snake. In fact, this worship of totems had reached a terrifying level because according to some ancient records, almost all existences that could be related to heroes basically had the appearance of a snake with a human face. For example, Suirenshi, Nuwa, Fuxi, and even the classic of mountains and seas, Gonggong, and Pengu had the appearance of a snake with a human face. However, there were 2 versions of why Huaxia's totem changed from a snake to a dragon. When the Yellow Emperor and Yinglong joined forces to conquer the world, not to mention the other clans, even the strongest Yan Emperor and Qiyu were defeated one by one. After the Yellow Emperor unified the world, Yinglong, as an ally, asked the Yellow Emperor to invite all the clans to go to Pusan for a talisman fusion. In other words, a part of the totem worshipped by each clan was taken out to form a new totem, which was later known as the Dragon Totem. After that, the benefits that the Dragon clan received were mind-numbing. Almost everything in the world could be related to the Dragon clan, but Yinglong became a true god of creation. The second version was that the Yellow Emperor set out to conquer the world, conquering clans of all sizes. Every time he defeated an opponent, he would take a part of the opponent's totem and add it to his own totem. This was to show his status as the victor, and also to deter those who dared to go against the Yellow Emperor's clan. Over time, when the Yellow Emperor became the ruler of the world, the original snake totem had become a different kind of monster. However, this monster carried the glory of the Yellow Emperor, so the Yellow Emperor waved his hand, and there was a dragon in the world. Many people said that one of the 12 zodiacs was a creature that did exist. They did not believe that the ancestors would include a creature that did not exist in the 12 zodiacs. However, if one did not look at those mythical stories, the truth should be so. The dragon was a creature that the original snake totem of the Yellow Emperor's clan absorbed part of the totems of the defeated clans. Although it did not exist, it symbolized the glory of the ancestors of mankind. Therefore, without the exaggeration of the mythical background, the ancestral dragon in the world should be the Yellow Emperor, Xianyuan. After that, even after his death, he would turn into a dragon soul to protect China. Later on, some emperors called themselves the true dragon son of heaven, but most of them were just bragging. In the eyes of the oldest emperors, the so-called dragon was not a creature, but the glory and responsibility of being the king of mankind. The descendants and successors of the dragon should be traced back to the Yellow Emperor, Xianyuan, and not some species that existed in legends. The meaning of "everyone is like a dragon" was also referring to the hope that the descendants of China would become heroes and great people, and not all demons and monsters, right? Of course, Lin Yuan was not sure if there was a world that was exactly the same as his previous world, but there was no mythical background in this world. However, he had indeed seen Hong Yun, Hanba, Yu Jiang, the Yin brothers, and other mythical figures. Therefore, he guessed that the Fushan talisman was something that really happened in his previous world. Thinking of this, Lin Yuan sighed. The existence of the Yellow Emperor, Xianyuan, was an insurmountable mountain in his eyes. None of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors were simple, not to mention that there were other incomparably powerful races in the Eldritch world, as well as some innate gods and demons that were born with the cultivation of Zenith Heaven. These powerful existences were firmly suppressed in the hands of Hongjun for countless years. Could he really deal with Hongjun? Taking a deep breath, Lin Yuan's desire to know the secret of the birth of the Tianwu world grew a little more. However, Lin Yuan's expression did not change. He just looked at Ying Zai indifferently. After a long time, he said in a deep voice, "Totems. Can you at least tell me how many totems there are in the God Worship sect? Or is it that the God Worship sect does not want to ally with this king, but to use me as cannon fodder?" The existence of totems was not something that needed to be hidden. Those ancient tribes would even carve totems in the most conspicuous places to tell all the nearby creatures that the tribe was under their protection. If Ying Zai was unwilling to tell him how many totems there were in the God Worship sect, Lin Yuan would really doubt the credibility of Ying Zai's words. Chapter 1201. Although there were many tribes in the ancient times and the totems they worshipped were quite complicated, due to the gap in time, there was very little credible information left behind. Even the totems could only be roughly described by species, such as the birds of the Yanzi clan and the sheep of the Sui clan. It was worth mentioning that many people said that Wu Zetian was the only and the first empress, but in fact, she was not. Yanzi was the first empress. Even Huaxiu, who was often confused with her, the big shot who gave birth to Fuxi and Yua, also had the surname Feng. The surname Feng was created after Yanzi and Suiren formed an alliance through marriage. Strictly speaking, Huaxiu was a member of Yanzi, not a person. The later generations honored the Yanzi clan as the Mysterious Lady, the Plain Lady, the Su Lady, and the Emperor Yanzi. In addition to the mythological background, the name of the North Star also came from her. Some legends even said that the river diagram and the Book of Luo were created by the Yanzi clan. The earliest symbols and words also came from her. Whether it was the time of the appearance or the contribution to mankind, the Yanzi clan was the first. However, the Yanzi clan was such a terrifying empress, yet their tribe's totem was only referred to as the black bird or the green bird. Later on, when the Yellow Emperor unified the world, he initiated the abdication system. After the 3 sovereigns ruled the world and the 5 emperors settled the world, culture gradually flourished and a series of well-known totems appeared. For example, the 4 ferocious beasts. Although Lin Yuan was still in awe of these ancient existences, he was not like a mountain Pao who entered the city and saw everything new. Just the guests of the Purple Cloud Palace, the Tianwu world had Shangqing Tianzuan and Red Cloud Taoist, Hanba, the direct descendant of the Yellow Emperor, the blood descendants of the Yinjia brothers, Baigan, Yujiang, and Luo Yu from the Green Mountains. The Zhou dynasty had enjoyed 800 years of national fate, but including himself, there was no emperor. Even his own territory was getting smaller and smaller, and he had to keep the national fate for 800 years even when the outside world was in chaos. Some people that Lin Yuan did not know were probably not ordinary. There might be a descendant of the Ying family on the side of God worship sect, but for Lin Yuan, his cards were obviously much smaller than those mentioned above. However, during the time of Ying Zheng, he was a man who dared to kill all the qi cultivators under the heaven, and had even sent Su Fu to lead his army to search for the immortal mountains in the ocean. If Ying Zheng was here, Lin Yuan would naturally have to show him some respect. But Ying Zheng was not worthy of his respect, and Ying Zheng should know this very well. What's more, even though the god-worshipping cult couldn't defeat the heavenly court, they had the confidence to fight against the heavenly court. No matter how one looked at it, the god-worshipping cult must have the backing of a mighty figure, right? Lin Yuan would not be surprised even if the four beasts stood behind Ying Zai. He would even feel that it was only natural. A man's name is like the shadow of a tree. This sentence was an unchanging truth no matter where it was. Just like now, Lin Yuan had cultivated an invincible aura in the heaven martial world. Even those whose cultivation was higher than Lin Yuan's would have to think twice before facing Lin Yuan. Many times, they would even weaken their aura before making a move. In fact, the reputation of the heavenly court in the untainted world was not good. After all, the original master of the heavenly court, Emperor Hao Yin, was just a boy beside Hong Jun in the legends. Not to mention the 6 saints of heaven, even Taoist Red Cloud and the demon master Kunpeng had to obediently bow their heads and call them senior brothers. Of course, Emperor Hao Yin only bowed his head in front of the top experts in the untainted world, which was much better than Zhang Byron. In addition, when the heavenly court was first established, it was extremely short of manpower in all aspects. Even if Hong Jun favored this boy, it was impossible for him to let his disciples join the heavenly court, right? Even if Hong Jun had the face and strength to do so, what good would it do for Hong Jun to humiliate the other experts in the untainted world? Thus, the gods' investiture tribulation was born. Many chess enthusiasts stood behind the scenes and even participated in it themselves. They fought until the sky turned dark and the earth turned dark. Only then did they fill up the list of gods and set up the embryonic form of the heavenly court. This made the heavenly court truly a great power that dominated the 3 realms. Of course, the heavenly court was not always hated by people. Zhang Byron, who was also the ruler of the heavenly court, was doing very well. When he became the ruler of the heavenly court was already extremely powerful. He even had the support of the Taisheng. He could be said to be extremely domineering. The immortals in the heavenly court were demoted at will. Who knew how many great qi practitioners in the mortal world were waiting to be ranked among the immortals? Even if the god worship sect was a remnant of the totems from the antiquity times, it absolutely did not have the courage to go against the heavenly court in the ancient times. It was the same even in the Tianwu world. After all, although the heavenly emperor of the Tianwu world was GFA, one should not forget that his elder brother was the Ziwei emperor. In the past, his generals Neza, Yang Jian, and the others also served in the heavenly court. It could be said that they were inextricably linked to the heavenly court. When the heavenly court was restored, GFA would naturally become the heavenly emperor of the Tianwu world. At that time, unless he directly fell out with Hong Jun and established his own sect, he would definitely have to support these immortals of the heavenly court. Even if it was a different world, he would still be the immortal king. If the god worship sect did not have a powerful backer behind them, even if Lin Yuan lent them the courage, they would not dare to fall out with the heavenly court. They are just some demons that are not presentable in public. In terms of reputation, perhaps they are not as good as you, Dragon King. Ying Zai put on a fake smile and cupped his hands. He slightly bowed to Lin Yuan and said, "Even if I say their names, Dragon King may not know. After all, you are in existence from the ancient times." Hearing this, Lin Yuan slightly narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "In that case, this king thinks that the so-called god worship sect is just a dispensable force. This king does not need your help." Lin Yuan's words could be said to be extremely disrespectful. In the face of the God-worship sect's emissary, he said that the God-worship sect was dispensable. What was the difference between this and slapping people in the face? No matter how good Ing Zai's calmness was, he could not help but change his expression at this moment. He sneered and said, "Dragon King, are you saying that even if the God-worship sect joins hands with the heavenly court, you don't care? If you don't care whether your souls will be scattered or not, does this king still need to care?" Lin Yuan opened his mouth, revealing a ferocious smile, and asked in a cold tone, Good. Ing Zai was so angry that he laughed and said the word good 3 times in a row. Immediately, he waved his big sleeve and said in a clear voice, "We will meet again in the future. I hope that when we meet in the future, Dragon King, you can still be so calm and composed and say that the God-worship sect is just force." Chapter 1202. Ing Zai emphasized the words dispensable, his anger almost reaching the heavens. Lin Yuan even suspected that if Ing Zai wasn't in the critical period of transforming and couldn't be affected, he might even fight with him in the city of trade. I say, don't look down on the God-worship sect. Although there are many small fries, if you want to be serious, I'm afraid even Red Cloud Taoist would have to avoid them. Let me see, Qiong Qi, Taodai, Handun, Bayan Jiao Ing, Bayan Gu Diao, Zhuhuai, Huodou. Any one of these 10 would be enough to make you suffer. Lin Yuan? In all likelihood, there was a big shot behind the worship of God's religion, which was what Lin Yuan had thought from the beginning. However, Lin Yuan had never expected that the foundation of the Church of Gods would be so tyrannical. Even Red Cloud Taoist would have to avoid them. Even Shangqing Celestial Venerable would have to go weak in the knees, okay? The 4 ancient beasts ranked at the top of the list were all famous, and any one of them had wrestled with Emperor Shun before. Although the 4 ancient beasts were all losers, they were all powerful beings in the prehistorical world. In fantasy novels, they were basically holy princes of holy clans, or top-grade families that could shake the entire continent with a stomp of their feet. Basically, all of them were related to the Yellow Emperor. For example, Qiong Qi was Xiaohao's untalented son, and Xiaohao was the Yellow Emperor's eldest son. If the dynasty wasn't abdicated, Qiong Qi's father would be the crown prince of a country. When he saw a terrifying existence like Hanba, Qiong Qi could even call her aunt. Baiyan was Zhuanshu's untalented son. In other words, Baiyan's background was more powerful than Qiong Qi's. After all, Zhuanshu was one of the 5 emperors and the Yellow Emperor's grandson. In terms of seniority, Baiyan might not be as powerful as Qiong Qi, but in terms of power, he was definitely above Qiong Qi. Handun was the one with the highest seniority among the 4 beasts because his father was the Yellow Emperor. As for Taotai, he should be considered one of the 4 beasts with a relatively low background. There were also many legends. For example, some people said that Taotai was the descendant of Yen Di, and some said that Taotai was the 5th son of the ancestral dragon. Even in the myths of later generations, when some immortals saw Taotai, they had to respectfully address him as the 5th young master. As for the other 6 ferocious beasts, they might not be as powerful as the 4 ferocious beasts, and none of them had the ability to challenge the human sovereign. However, they were definitely among the top ferocious beasts in the classic of mountains and seas. With such a group together, it wouldn't be a problem to call them the 10 ancient beasts. However, it was indeed as the system had said. Any one of these 10 ferocious beasts was not something that the current Lin Yuan could deal with. If he were to face one of them alone, Lin Yuan might be forced to use all his trump cards, and his chances of winning might not even be more than 50%. What's more, the vicious 10 were on the same side. If Lin Yuan really wanted to shed all pretense of cordiality with the Church of Gods, and if he was hindered by the matter of the 10 ancient beasts, the other party would probably come together. After all, there was still a difference between reality and novels. In novels, the protagonists slapped the children of the aristocratic families, but they only beat the young ones and the old ones. The problem was that each of the 10 ancient beasts had lived for countless years and had seen countless storms. If they were provoked, combined with Lin Yuan's achievements and potential, they would not come to test Lin Yuan at all. It was estimated that the direct thought in their minds was that this boy would become a great man in the future and must not be left alive. Taking a deep breath, Lin Yuan calmed down a little. His originally emotionless face suddenly showed a touch of ridicule. He grinned and said, "I thought that the Church of Gods was backed by a few powerful people, but it turns out that they are all fierce, stubborn, violent, and unpresentable. But to be honest, except for ancient beasts, do you think I would be afraid of the rest?" Seeing a touch of horror on Ingzai's face, Lin Yuan changed the topic and said with a smile, "However, even if the 4 ancient beasts come in person, this king's attitude will not change. There are not many places in the Tianwu world that believe in totems. You have been hiding for many years. How much power of incense can you accumulate? If you fight with this king, it's hard to say whether you can win or not, but you can be sure that the final winner will not be the Church of Gods. Do you believe it or not?" Hearing this, Ingzai opened his mouth and his face was a little gloomy. For a moment, he could not find any words to refute Lin Yuan's words. After all, this was the truth. Compared to the cultivation system of the untainted world, the supreme masters and monster kings in the Tianwu world had actually reached the level of immortal. Regardless of whether they were earthly immortals or celestial immortals, their essential strength was not much different. Just like in the untainted world, after reaching the level of Monster King, one could begin to occupy a mountain and be the king. Unless one provoked the famous immortals on the list of deification, the later Qi practitioners who became immortals might not be able to do anything to these monster kings. Take the monkey as an example. Although he called himself the Great Sage, in fact, he was only a monster king. At most, he was at the peak of the Monster King realm. Naturally, no one cared about him when he was the handsome Monkey King in Mount Huagua. However, after he called himself the Great Sage, the Heavenly Court immediately launched a destructive attack on Mount Huagua. Even if the game between the Most High and the Western religious sect in the journey to the West was not to be discussed, the Heavenly Court would still attack the monkey. After all, the title that the monkey gave himself did not match his strength at all. This was just like the officials in ancient times who had different standards of food and clothing according to different ranks and departments. As long as you obediently stayed within this range, no one would care even if you were a powerful minister who overthrew the emperor. However, if you jumped out of this range, you would immediately become a rebellious traitor. Of course, it would be fine if the monkey was the only one who called himself the Great Sage. However, the monkey and the other 6 demons were reckless. After they became sworn brothers, they did not take the living beings of the 3 realms seriously at all. Titles such as the Great Sage who pacifies heaven, the Great Sage who covers the sea, the Great Sage who drives the god, and the Dragon Clan of the 4 Seas were basically directly offended the immortals of the Heavenly Court, the immortals of deification, and the Dragon Clan of the 4 Seas. They were just 7 monster kings. How could they have a good ending if they were so arrogant? Look at the demons and ghosts on the journey to the West. They were all majestic. In fact, they were all props used by the Western religious sect to put on a show. No matter whether they were good or bad, good or evil, they would basically be killed by the monkey. If it was during the journey to the gods, they would definitely die. If they died, they would be sent to the god list to be controlled by others. Only ghosts would be willing to take up such a position. Those with a little bit of status and background would not agree to use their own lives to put on a show for the Western religious sect. Chapter 1203. Therefore, before the journey to the West calamity began, all the demons begged their grandfathers and grandmothers. They even used up all their wealth to invite the mighty figures to protect their lineage so that they would not be involved in the journey to the West calamity. For the untainted world at that time, many things were actually out of Hongjuan's control. For example, the 3 emperors of the Fire Cloud Cave, Empress Pingxin, and the Grand Supreme all challenged Hongjuan's supreme ruling power. Even though the Grand Supreme was not a saint of the Great Path at that time, involving the demon race would inevitably involve all the forces and even draw out the remaining forces of the 3 tribes of the Taichu. Therefore, even Hongjun had to compromise and let these demons go. However, at the same time, the Grand Supreme and the others also made a certain concession, that was, they had to gather the 81 tribulations. However, even if the Heavenly Court and the Western sect joined forces, they could not gather the 81 tribulations. After all, although the demon race was weak at that time, they were not completely without a backer. If they really wanted to look for connections, whose ancestors did not have one or two mighty figures. For example, Fuxi, one of the three emperors, had a human head and a snake body. Although he was one of the three emperors, he was a real demon. After all, Fuxi's sister, Nua, was the only saint of the demon race. She also had a human head and a snake body. It would be strange if Fuxi, who was the elder brother, was not a demon. Behind the demon race stood a saint of the heavenly path, one of the three emperors. In addition, the ancestral dragon, the primordial phoenix, and the first Kirin were not dead. Although they were also tribulation takers, the means of the three tribes were much more powerful than the later calamities. For example, although the ancestral dragon was sealed, no one could really kill the ancestral dragon. Although the primordial phoenix did not appear in the world in the undying volcano, Kong Xian and the golden-winged rock were the children of the primordial phoenix. Moreover, the primordial phoenix was in the undying volcano. It was like Empress Pingxin was in the netherworld. Even if the primordial phoenix was in the undying volcano, it was not afraid of Hongjun. Together with the first Kirin, it could be said that the first Kirin suffered the lightest loss during the first calamity of the Dragon Han era. At the end of the calamity, in order to protect its race, the first Kirin sought refuge with Hongjun. It was also the only existence among the three ancestors who had fallen. The famous Kirin cliff was formed after the first Kirin fell. Its legitimate son, the four odd beasts, also became the mount of the heavenly Lord Yuanshi. However, compared to the declining dragon race and the phoenix race, the Kirin race, which was the embodiment of auspicious signs, was the best preserved force. At the same time, the Kirin race was also the existence that hated Hongjun the most. Although they were all working under Hongjun, if there was a day when a situation similar to the battle between Hongjun and Hongjun happened, even if Hongjun was at a disadvantage, the Kirin race would definitely be the first to rebel. No matter how powerful Hongjun was, it was impossible for him to fight the entire untainted land alone. Taking a step back, even if he could fight the entire untainted land alone, so what? If he killed everyone in the untainted land, who would he rule? Where would he absorb the power of incense from? Of course, he could conquer all the worlds, but Hongjun could not suppress all the worlds alone. Even if he could not integrate all the races in the world. Moreover, although the untainted land was a boundless world among the boundless worlds, it was because there were 3,000 innate gods and demons. It was not because Hongjun could fight an entire boundless world alone. In other boundless worlds, there must be existences that were not inferior to him. If he kicked an iron plate again, he would have nowhere to cry. Conquering all the worlds without soldiers and generals, what was the difference between that and a joke? In the end, wouldn't he have to repeat the magnificent feat of the great god Pangu? Hongjun did not have such great courage, nor did he have the talent to sacrifice himself for the sake of all living beings. In desperation, the gods of the heaven and the Buddhas of the spirited mountain had no choice but to send their own monsters to join the calamity. That was why people later jokingly said that the monsters with backers were all taken away by the backers, and the monsters without backers were all killed by the monkey. That was normal. After all, the monsters without backers were basically those with weak bloodlines and low cultivation. Apart from Zhu Beiji and Monk Sha, who were teammates for the monkey would either be smashed to death by the stick or fought fiercely. He would even be captured by the monsters. In the end, the gods and Buddhas would always coincidentally appear to help the monkey to take away the monsters. After all, the monsters would not really risk their lives to help the Western sect. Moreover, most of the monsters were from the heaven. At that time, the heaven was the place of the supreme ruler, and the calamity of the journey to the West was a battle between Buddhism and Taoism. It was already good enough that the heaven was willing to help, so how could they expect the heaven to do the whole thing? Therefore, the monsters that were killed were those who had no background, no strength, and did not even know that they were facing a calamity. It was normal for them to be killed by the stick. In fact, it was not the first time that the mountain bandits among the mortals were used as scapegoats if they could not gather enough of the 81 calamities. After all, they were existences at the Demon King level. It would be ridiculous if the monkey could not deal with them. From this, it could be seen that the monkey causing havoc in the heaven was exaggerated. Even the monsters raised by the gods could be on par with the monkey, and even completely defeat him. The strength of the gods was naturally something that the monkey could only look up to. "I'm doing my best to cooperate with your performance." This saying couldn't be more appropriate for those immortals who had a monkey as their enemy. The monkey's strength was obvious. There was no need to mention the level of the other 6 great sages. Apart from the bull demon king who was a little tougher and was stuffed into the calamity, the other 5 great sages had disappeared without a trace. There was no news of them at all. At this level, it could be said that they had reached the end of their cultivation. They could not live forever. At most, they could move mountains and fill seas, and live freely in the mortal world. If they wanted to reach a higher level, they had to find a paradise and recruit disciples and believers to accumulate the power of incense. At the beginning of the world, there were very few primitive creatures. Most of them were at the level of ancestors, and there were only a few at most. They were tainted with the power of merit and were naturally very powerful when they were born. They were similar to the carriers of the great Tao, like the innate gods and demons. They could even be said to be born as saints, such as Yang Mei, Shichen, and Qian Kuan. There were also some who evolved from the first living creatures in the untainted land or gained intelligence through lucky chance. Although they were not born as sages, they were basically sage to be, such as Red Cloud Taoist and Demon Master Kunpeng. As time passed, the merit of creation was gradually divided up, and the creatures born became weaker and weaker. This was especially true after humans became the protagonists of heaven and earth. At that time, the creatures born were only slightly more powerful than ordinary beasts and had some special abilities. They might not be able to gain an advantage over some strong humans. Chapter 1204. However, this was also what Hongjun wanted. Hongjun could not bear to see the living beings in the world getting stronger and stronger. Otherwise, he would not have changed the way of cultivation. In the later era, when humans and demons could only become stronger through cultivation, the path of cultivation would stop at the Demon King and Taoism realm, which was the threshold of the immortal realm in the untainted world. However, at that time, there were powerful beings like the ancestor Yang Mei. Hongjun could not be too greedy. In addition to some other calculations, he started the investiture of the gods and showed the real way of cultivation. However, he also used the investiture of the gods to control these immortals. Before they became sages, even if they were immortal, they were just spirits that were controlled. As for who could become sages, wasn't it up to Hongjun, who controlled the heavenly way, to decide? Of course, the main reason was that there were large and small wars between the worlds. The untainted world was indeed a relatively powerful world. However, it was impossible to rely on Hongjun and Yang Mei to defeat all the invading worlds, let alone destroy and annex other worlds. Therefore, the way of cultivation was something that Hongjun had to teach even if he did not want to. Just like the 6 sages. The so-called Qi refinement cultivators were essentially a tool used by Hongjun to maintain his rule. If he encountered a powerful one, he would use the investiture of the gods and elixirs to control them before teaching them the real way of cultivation. However, no matter how powerful Hongjun was, he could not control other sky demon gods. For example, after the battle between the ancestor Yang Mei and Hongjun, she just left the untainted world and wandered in the sea of bitterness, seeing different worlds. In addition to the existence of extremely powerful individuals, there were some groups that were not inferior to the celestial sect of wonders. For example, the forces of the 3 clans led by the ancestor dragon and the Yuan Feng, the Wu tribe led by Empress Pingxin, and the ghost warriors led by Qiyu. Qiyu was a Wu with a primordial spirit. He fought with the Yellow Emperor for the throne of the human king and failed. After death, he did not enter the reincarnation cycle. He established his own ghost warriors tribe in the netherworld. Even Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva was afraid of him and other forces. Among them, the most powerful was the totem of the human race. After working together with the Yellow Emperor to rewrite the dragon totem, Yinglong had become a god of creation. By the time the Yellow Emperor unified the world, Yinglong's strength was no weaker than the current prime of Tong Tian. After so many years of accumulation, Yinglong was able to stay in the south to recuperate. Otherwise, according to Hongjuan's methods, Yinglong would have either been killed or driven away. There was no way he could have retreated successfully. The time of the totem's appearance could not be verified. However, it had risen during the Great War of the Witch Demon race. After the Witch Demon race and the Witch Demon race had fallen from grace, the totem had instead become the strongest force outside of the Xian sect led by Hongjun. Many people said that the Shang dynasty and the Zhou dynasty were already the oldest dynasties that could be verified. However, there were also many people who firmly believed that an even older dynasty had existed before the Shang dynasty, the Xia dynasty. It was even to the extent that there could have been different dynasties before the Xia dynasty. This was also a speculation. Only those who had experienced that era knew that it was a long and drawn-out war. It was a terrifying battle between the Xian sect's cultivators and the totems of various tribes. Countless powerful cultivators and totems walked onto the battlefield dauntlessly, almost completely shattering the entire eldritch world. At that time, the Xia dynasty was not considered strong. Even though it had the protection of the totems, it was almost annihilated in that war. A large amount of its existence had been erased. Even the Xia dynasty itself was almost wiped out, let alone the dynasties before the Xia dynasty. After that war, even the existence of the totems themselves had become a symbol and not something that truly existed. This was because the victors of that war were the Xian sect's cultivators led by Hongjun. Regarding that history, as a bystander, the heavenly Tao was actually very clear about it. Through the knowledge instilled in him by the system, Lin Yuan also understood most of that history. The totem ancient god could be said to be the only existence in the entire eldritch world that had fought a head-on war with Hongjun and the Xian sect. Compared to the scheming during the Great Witch Demon War, the internal strife during the investiture of the gods, and the concealment during the journey to the west, the destruction of the totems was the only time that Hongjun had made up his mind to wipe out his opponent. However, he could not do it from the level of scheming. He could only lead the Xian sect's cultivators to fight the opponent head-on. In the end, he barely won with his strength. Even the 6 destined sages of that time had fallen in that war more than once. If their primordial spirits were not entrusted to the heavenly Tao, even if they fell, they could be reborn from the heavenly Tao. Perhaps there would not be the 6 destined sages by Hongjuan's side. Even Hongjun himself had suffered heavy injuries in that war. If not for this, Sanqing would not have had the chance to plot against Hongjun during the investiture of the gods. This was because Hongjun was recuperating from his injuries at that time. Although he had planned the investiture of the gods, he had only personally participated in the investiture of the gods when the investiture of the gods was about to end. It was also because of this that when Lin Yuan wanted to practice the way of the totem ancient god, it also supported most of the time. Although after embarking on the way of the totem ancient god, Lin Yuan's future was likely to be out of its control, as the way of the heavenly Tao, even if it had already given birth to its own spiritual wisdom, most of the time, its rationality was far more than its emotions. Lin Yuan's cultivation of the way of the totem ancient god would obviously increase his chances of winning against Hongjun. As for the future Lin Yuan's loss of control, what did that have to do with the way of the heavenly Tao? After getting rid of Hongjun, the way of the heavenly Tao would not make the same mistake again. It would never allow others to get close to it and control it. Therefore, even if it lost control of Lin Yuan, in its eyes, Lin Yuan was just a trouble like Yinglong was in Hongjuan's eyes. He was not a death calamity that was enough to threaten its existence. Anyway, as long as its hosts did not all cultivate the way of the totem ancient god, there was nothing it could not accept. If one day it really had to kill Lin Yuan, how it dealt with Hongjun now would be how it dealt with Lin Yuan in the future. When Lin Yuan first started to cultivate the way of the totem ancient god, he did not want to become a puppet of the system. But now, after obtaining the records of that history from the system, he was shocked to realize the power of totems. The leisurely Yinglong under Hongjuan's nose was the totem. The 4 beasts that were defeated by Emperor Shun and could not be killed were the totem. The Xianmen group was severely damaged and gave Sanqing a chance, which caused Hongjun to lose control of everything was the totem. Even the existence of the totem, if mentioned in front of Hongjun, was afraid that Hongjun would be defeated. If it were not for the fact that in that history Hongjun had lost too much face and suffered too many losses after he destroyed the powerful totem group, how could he not show off his outstanding military achievements, but erase and hide that history? Chapter 1205. How powerful the totem group was in its heyday was a mystery to many primitive creatures. After all, in order to cover up the war between the Xian sect and the totem group, Hongjun almost cut off the river of time and buried most of the history before the Shang dynasty. Even Hongjun could not shake the existence of the totem group, except for historical fragments such as Zhang Jie's creation of characters and Sui Ren's creation of fire. The current state of the totem group was also a mystery to Lin Yuan. According to the information that the system had given him this time, the totem group had almost been completely destroyed. Except for Yinglong, whose strength was now comparable to Hongjuan's, all the other totems had been destroyed in the Xian sect. A huge cultivation force had become a symbol that only existed. This was not something that could be done with just one massacre. Hongjun could do this, which could only mean that he had reached some kind of agreement with Yinglong in private. And after this agreement was reached, Hongjun completely destroyed the totem group and directly destroyed the totem group. In other words, after the war, Hongjun did not have the intention to accept followers at all. He directly killed them all. But the 10 beasts of the god-worshipping sect, Lin Yuan's eyes flashed, and he took the initiative to communicate with the system with his mind. The system was silent for a moment, and then slowly replied to Lin Yuan. Is there anything to be confused about? For example, if you were to die in the endless sea, would you really die then? Hearing this, Lin Yuan could only respond with silence. Although he was not the kind of lunatic who had to practice to the maximum level in the novice village and pretend to be a pig to eat a tiger, Lin Yuan was still very concerned about the safety of his life. Every Black Water Dragon King temple left in the northern frontier could be said to be Lin Yuan's life. If he died in the endless sea, unless the other party also mastered the power of the underworld black water and directly made him unable to be reincarnated, even the means of attacking the soul could not be completely killed. Even he, a demonic beast who had been cultivating for 4 years, had such means. How could the totem group that could fight against the Xian sect in their heyday be so easy to kill? After one calamity after another, he did not see the destruction of the 3 tribes and the extinction of the liches and demons. To completely destroy a force, even the way of heaven could not pay the price. And even if the price was paid, it might not be able to completely destroy a force, because you could not calculate all the other parties' backup plan. There would always be a few fishes that escaped the net. Of course, when the Celestial Sect of Wonders and the Totem Clan were at war, Yinglong did not take action. However, he was still a member of the Totem Clan. Perhaps he could ignore the life and death of the Totem Clan for the sake of benefits, but he would not watch that person completely destroy the Totem Clan. However, he would still send a few survivors away. Even that person would give him face. Moreover, even if the Totem group was completely destroyed, you know very well in your heart that the Eldritch world and the Tianwu world are on a completely different level. The Tianwu world is full of fear and ignorance of the outside world, but the Eldritch world has been conquering the Sea of Chaos and the heavenly battlefield for so many years, who knows how many worlds it has destroyed. How could the totem group that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Xian sect not know anything about the myriad worlds? In fact, in every world, there is the inheritance of the totem group. It is just that some of them gradually walked on other paths with the passage of time. Let me give you an example. In a middle world that is infinitely close to the Great Thousand World, there is the existence of the 10 immemorial ferocious beasts. Among them, the true dragon, the phoenix and the Kirin grew up in that middle world, but without talking about the foundation, their strength is not weaker than the 3 tribes of the Eldritch world. That person is indeed powerful. In the Eldritch world, he is almost an autocrat. He can suppress the 3 tribes by himself, but there is no lack of powerful figures in the myriad worlds who can stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Otherwise, why do you think that when the death tribulation appeared, he just sent a projection to greet you, and then only the heavenly court became active? Believe it or not, as soon as that person leaves the Eldritch world, in less than 10 breaths of time, the Eldritch world will be beaten into a wasteland. After the system displayed line after line of words, even with Lin Yuan's current temperament, he could not help but shiver. The Sea of Chaos and the Heavenly Battlefield. These were 2 existences that he did not understand at all. After leaving the world, the Void Zone was the Sea of Bitterness. However, the word chaos was a great promotion in the Eldritch world. After the apatheicized tribulation, it was recorded that the 6 heavenly sages and Hongjun had established Taoist rites in the chaos, leaving only their doppelgangers to manage the Eldritch world. According to Lin Yuan's current vision, they did not do this to let the Eldritch world enter a period of autonomy, but to resist some existences, they had to send their real bodies to the battlefield, leaving only their doppelgangers to manage the Eldritch world. The reason why the chaos was a taboo in the Eldritch world was that even sages could die in it if they were not careful. However, there was no detailed record of the dangers in the chaos. Therefore, the Sea of Chaos and Bitterness is the heavenly battlefield? Lin Yuan sent out his thoughts again. The heavenly battlefield is the heavenly battlefield, and the Sea of Chaos is the Sea of Bitterness. Of course, the Sea of Chaos is a saying in the Eldritch world. The former refers to an unknown area that contains great danger and great terror, while the latter is a saying of the Western religious sect. It is used here to generally refer to the void outside the world. It can be said to be an endless existence with no end in sight. When the chaos and the Sea of Bitterness are put together, it can only be said to be a battlefield, or it may contain other uncertain factors. For example, the Sea of Bitterness outside the heavenly martial world can be called the Sea of Chaos because Yang Mei is in charge. It means that the Sea of Bitterness outside the heavenly martial world has a great danger that can kill sages. Moreover, in the eyes of an existence like Yang Mei, there is no way to hide from him. Space and time are all under his control when entering the heavenly martial world. Therefore, the Sea of Chaos is just a place of great danger and great terror in the void. As for the heavenly battlefield, well, you will probably come into contact with it soon. I can tell you with full responsibility that once the heavenly martial world officially becomes a medium-class world, whether you are willing or not, you will be pulled into the war of the myriad worlds. You can either defeat other worlds and plunder their land and resources to strengthen the heavenly martial world, or vice versa. Any world in the Sea of Bitterness is the hunter and the prey. No one will care whether you are willing or not. As long as they can set foot in the heavenly martial world, they will definitely point their weapons at the heavenly martial world. You can't be thinking that those gods and Buddhas in the history of the heavenly martial world who left behind cultivation methods, spiritual seeds, and bloodlines were just doing good deeds, right? Chapter 1206. In fact, Lin Yuan was not against participating in the War of the Myriad Worlds. In fact, he had already started preparing for it. However, the news brought by the system made Lin Yuan suck in a breath of cold air. He knew that the relationship between the Myriad Worlds was very bad, even to the point of being absolutely irreconcilable. The area of a world was only so big. No matter how frugal one was, there was still a limit. If one wanted to continue growing, one had to plunder other worlds, such as the 33 heavens of the celestial court of the primitive world and the 24 heavens of the Western sect. Before they were refined, most of them were actually other middle worlds or colossal worlds. Lin Yuan suddenly remembered a science fiction novel he had read in his previous life. Some of the theories in it were very suitable for the myriad worlds. Firstly, survival was the first need of a civilization. However, as the civilization continued to grow and expand, the total amount of matter in the universe remained the same. Therefore, if one wanted to continue to survive, one had to plunder other civilizations. On the other hand, whether it was to continue to grow and expand or just to survive, the other side had to do something similar. Secondly, Although some connections and inheritances would be established between the myriad worlds, in general, they might not even be able to understand their own world clearly. Naturally, they would not pay much attention to other worlds. Therefore, when two unfamiliar worlds collided, a chain of suspicion was bound to arise. For example, one's world could not determine whether the other world had ill intentions or good intentions towards it. It could not even determine how the other world would determine whether the other world had ill intentions or good intentions towards it. What was more terrifying was that it could not even determine whether the other world would attack it. Under such circumstances, a series of cold wars, confrontations, and vigilance were bound to occur, even if both sides had no ill intentions in the beginning. However, the longer such an atmosphere lasted, once something that broke the balance happened, a war would be triggered. Under such circumstances, the myriad worlds might only have the lowest level of goodwill. In other words, as long as one's world did not communicate with one's world would not take the initiative to start a war in a world where one's world did not have an urgent need. On the other hand, if one's world was exposed to one's sight first and made some hostile actions, then this goodwill would instantly dissipate. This was not good news. It could even be said that this news was extremely bad. Although the Tianwu world had a long history, it was only a small world in the end. The number of strongest experts in this world could not be considered many, and in the Eldritch world, they had only just touched the threshold of immortal. If this level of battle power was directly thrown into the all-heavens battlefield, it would be no different from the primitive people of the Stone Age challenging a planetary civilization. What was even more terrifying was that once the Martial Heaven world became a medium-class world, the natives of the Martial Heaven world wouldn't be able to increase their strength in a short time. However, the Martial Heaven world's power would be greatly increased. Even quasi-saints would be able to descend upon the Martial Heaven continent. Even if they couldn't use their full strength, they wouldn't be existences that immortals could contend against. Moreover, because of Hongjuan's death tribulation, there were probably many big shots who had set their eyes on the Martial Heaven world. Currently, there was a group of traders from the Eldritch world, as well as Tong Tian, a ruthless person who had established his own sect. Even the heavenly court of the Eldritch world had officially intervened in the Martial Heaven world's internal strife. Currently, there was also the God Worship sect, which had the Totem sect behind it. Moreover, it was hard to say whether or not there were other powers that had set their eyes on the Martial Heaven world, such as the existence that had forced the grassland wolf tribe to live in seclusion, or the mysterious power that had placed cultivation methods here. After the Martial Heaven world became a world apart, each of these existences had the ability to challenge half of the Martial Heaven world's cultivation world. Coupled with the power behind them, destroying the natives of the Martial Heaven world was just a matter of a thought. F***CK. Hell's opening. Lin Yuan cursed as he replied. According to the theory in the science fiction novel he had read in his previous life, all worlds were threats to each other, so naturally, there were two dangerous concepts that could lead to the destruction of the world. 1. Let you know of my existence. 2. Let you continue to exist. Therefore, in such a cruel battlefield where there was no choice, the only choice for a medium-class world was to hide themselves like a speck of dust. Before accumulating enough strength, they would not expose their existence because of anything. However, in the current situation, it was absolutely impossible to do so. Think positively. Don't be so pessimistic. The system comforted Lin Yuan, but Lin Yuan inexplicably felt a sense of schadenfreude. After a moment of silence, Lin Yuan said faintly, "If I die, it won't do you any good. Your investment and plans will all go down the drain. Once the thing that is bred in the Tianwu world falls into the hands of that person, Tong Tian sect leader, or Taoist Red Cloud, then you can prepare to be a stray dog for the rest of your life and slowly wander in the myriad of worlds." The system directly typed out a line of ellipses. Listen, is this what a human should say? Host, please pay attention to your words. The current situation was not caused by my initiative, nor was it within my expectations. In the world outside the chaotic world, I can't use my full strength. Even if I want to help you, it's destined that I won't be able to do so. But if you threaten me like this, it's meaningless. What do you say? Lin Yuan directly replied with a sneer, I'm not threatening you. I'm just stating a fact. Because according to the current situation of the martial heaven world, unless I have the strength to stand shoulder to shoulder with that person at the moment of the world's advancement, or the natives of this world break through one by one, there will be at least 5 sage to be appearing. Only then can the martial heaven world continue to exist. If I'm placed in such an environment, even surviving is a problem, let alone competing for the treasure. Speaking of this, Lin Yuan's expression became a little strange. Then, with a mocking smile, he said, Hey, don't tell me you're thinking that I'll fight for the treasure at all costs before I die, and then let you take it away with your own strength to ensure that you're the biggest winner? Am I that kind of system? Nonsense. Lin Yuan, I'm warning you, don't smear the system's innocence for no reason. Following Lin Yuan's mocking voice, the system quickly responded, as if it didn't even hesitate for a moment. However, it was clear that from a psychological point of view, if the system responded too quickly or too slowly, it meant that there was a big problem within. Chapter 1207. This dog system, he was afraid that it really thought that way. Thinking about that, Lin Yuan's face immediately revealed a sinister expression. Taking a deep breath, Lin Yuan felt that the lump of air in his heart had eased a lot. Only then did he open his mouth and say, That's right, don't tell me that you think that controlling me is the same as controlling the other hosts. You can't just randomly give me a mission and I'll let you do things for me. After that, you'll think that you've taken advantage of me, right? If the system had a physical body, it would definitely stretch out its hand and rub its chest. After all, Lin Yuan's words were really too heart-wrenching. However, at the beginning, it really did think that way. Although giving up on Lin Yuan, a host with such great potential, was like cutting off a piece of meat for the system right now, but if it could obtain the secrets of the Sky Martial world, it might not even need Lin Yuan to deal with Hongjun. Not to mention, Lin Yuan was already so terrifying now, who knew if Lin Yuan would become the next Hongjun in the future? However, it's a pity that you don't have the means to forcefully control me. On my way to where I am today, there have been fights, dangers, and I have also relied on the luck that you brought me to develop the northern frontier. However, if I leave you to me, I'll just lose a way to quickly grow. Any mission you give me doesn't have enough binding force. For example, you can give out a mission to snatch a treasure when the world is upgrading. According to the trust that the other hosts that you've nurtured have in you, 7 out of 10 of them would choose to complete your mission without hesitation. Because they firmly believe that they are the main characters of this era, and you, as their cheat, will live and die with them. I dare say that 80% of the hosts under you don't know your true identity, right? In other words, other than me, there are only a few hosts who know your true identity. Even if they know that they will have to face that person sooner or later, it's just like those young people in my previous life playing games. Even if it's that person in their eyes, it's nothing more than a boss. Lin Yuan waved his tail and sneered, But I'm different. As long as you can obtain that treasure, you can abandon me and the martial heaven world at any time. So no matter how generous the reward is, how severe the punishment is, or even if you kill me, I won't do your mission. Because whether I do it or not, I'll die. Why would I let a person who abandoned me at a critical moment benefit? If you put it that way, the system wanted to display words to refute Lin Yuan, but after a long time, it could not continue to display other words. It had dragged Lin Yuan's soul out of a dying body and threw him into an even crueler world. It could be said that no one knew Lin Yuan better than it did other than Lin Yuan himself. Abandoning Lin Yuan at a critical moment was tantamount to betrayal. And in Lin Yuan's eyes, the word betrayal would undoubtedly bring back many memories that he didn't want to face. So Lin Yuan had zero tolerance for betrayal. If it really came to that, even if the punishment for the mission was to kill him, Lin Yuan wouldn't even frown. You should know that in the Great Thousand Worlds, even if the soul is destroyed, it can be saved. For example, if someone waves the 6-soul banner, it will cause the 3,000 remnant souls of the ancient sky demon god to fly out and devour them. But if a saint sells a bit of their true spirit, they can send them into the cycle of reincarnation. If the price is enough, it is even possible to directly revive them. Don't forget how you came to this world, so I have already proven to you that I have this ability. If it really comes to that, I can guarantee that as long as you tell me the secret of the Sky Martial world, I will protect you from death. At worst, I will send you to another world. With my support and your current experience, you will recover your strength very quickly. The system still didn't give up and wanted to continue persuading Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan's face was full of ridicule. He said, "If you can really do this, I don't mind cultivating again. But my request is that when you give out the mission, you must add this matter to the mission reward. That's not too much, right?" This time, the system didn't immediately reply to Lin Yuan. Instead, it fell into a strange silence. And this was also within Lin Yuan's expectations. Take Lin Yuan's blood sacrifice wishing technique as an example. In theory, this was a karmic divine ability. If the blood used as a sacrifice reached a certain level in terms of quality and quantity, Lin Yuan could even use the blood sacrifice wishing technique to directly curse Hongjun to death. Moreover, it would be the kind that would completely destroy Hongjun's physical body and soul. But theory was just theory. Nowadays, Lin Yuan rarely used the blood sacrifice wishing technique. Because what could be done with it, Lin Yuan could also do with a little effort. Why would he need to bleed himself or kill other creatures? Moreover, the blood sacrifice wishing technique was not without requirements. The stronger the blood master was, the higher the quality of the blood. With Lin Yuan's current cultivation, if he let out a third of his blood, if converted to other creatures, he would have to kill at least 2 million mortals and collect all of their blood to achieve the same effect. Putting it in the system, it was actually universal. Back then, the system was able to easily extract Lin Yuan's soul from a dying body because no matter how many skills Lin Yuan practiced, he was still an ordinary person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been defeated by those bodyguards. Extracting the soul of an ordinary person didn't require much divine ability. Even a postnatal chi practitioner could do this with the help of some magic treasures. But now Lin Yuan was a level 8 desolate demon. He was only a step away from becoming a demon king. In the great desolate world, Lin Yuan's cultivation could already be considered as a half-immortal realm existence. Even the system couldn't easily extract his soul. And even if it was successfully extracted, there was no place in the Sky Martial world that could allow Lin Yuan to reincarnate. But if it was stuffed into another body, if it was to find a little black snake and stuff a desolate demon realm soul into it, it was afraid that before Lin Yuan could wake up, the body would collapse on its own. In short, one obstacle after another was placed here. Even the system couldn't break through it. Therefore, its promise was nothing more than an empty promise. Unless it was willing to add these conditions to the mission reward. Under the effect of the rules, it couldn't make empty promises. Once it promised this kind of reward, it meant that the rules recognized that it could do it. Then, no matter what, it had to fulfill its promise to Lin Yuan. Chapter 1208. The system still remained silent. Obviously, the negotiation had failed. Now that Lin Yuan was at the 8th level of the desolate demon realm, the system was powerless to do anything. If the world leveled up, Lin Yuan's cultivation would definitely continue to rise. At that time, the system would be even more powerless. With its current strength, it was unable to shake the soul of an immortal, let alone a realm above immortal. Both the system and Lin Yuan were well aware of this situation. Therefore, the rules would not allow the system to add this matter to the mission reward because it could not do it. The rules would never allow cheating. Since it was a transaction, it had to be an exchange of equal value. Otherwise, it would not be carried out. Lin Yuan only smiled at the silent system and put away the playful expression on his face. As Hongjun's death tribulation, whether the heavenly court investigated clearly or not, he must die. After all, Hongjun had dominated the Eldritch world for countless years and had suppressed countless monsters. Even in the daily games, only the almighty of the Sage-to-Be were qualified to exchange a few blows with Hongjun. If it was known that he had misjudged a junior from the future, where would he put his old face? Although no one had brought this matter to the surface, it could be said that everyone was well aware of it. Red Cloud Taoist had not contacted him for a long time. Hitorigami had only warned the northern frontier and disappeared. Although Shangqing Tianzuan had come once before, it was mostly to pass on a message for Hitorigami. It could be said that at this time, no one was willing to have a deep relationship with Lin Yuan. As for the experts from the Eldritch world, they would not be willing to stand out and fight side by side with Lin Yuan. Although Lin Yuan had only seen Hongjuan's projection once, he had often heard of that man's methods. Therefore, he was very clear that once the Tianwu world finished leveling up, the Eldritch world would definitely not send small monsters for him to level up. Most likely, one or even several sage-to-be experts would descend and directly crush the Eldritch world. But they could run, but could Lin Yuan? The answer was obviously no. No matter how much Joss flame power Lin Yuan could use, once he left the Heaven Martial world, he would be like a rootless duckweed. Let alone going to other worlds, he might not even be able to cross the Sea of Bitterness. Therefore, for Lin Yuan, there was only one way out. He had to become the god of the underworld of this world. That way, as the three realms were restored and the world leveled up, he would also have the battle prowess of a demi-saint because of the position of god of the underworld. Furthermore, he would be a demi-saint who could use all of his strength. Only then would he be able to stand firm until the Tianwu world leveled up to a great thousand world. If he could successfully cultivate the all-life scripture, then in the Tianwu world, Lin Yuan would be on the same level as the rules. Even if Hongjun came personally, he wouldn't be afraid. Ding! Congratulations to the host for triggering the breakthrough mission. Mission requirement. Host must break through to the peak of the desolate demon realm within 10 days to complete the mission. Mission reward. System update once. Failure penalty. System stripping. A new mission notification appeared in Lin Yuan's consciousness. After a while, Lin Yuan couldn't help but laugh. This time, the system's mission was obviously very rushed. Not only did it not have an official name, it even broke the restrictions of the rules to a certain extent. If it was in the past, Lin Yuan definitely wouldn't trigger the breakthrough mission until he reached the peak of the desolate demon realm. Furthermore, he would have accepted a rather difficult mission. A mission like this that required him to reach the peak of the desolate demon realm within a time limit was as simple as eating and drinking for a cheater like Lin Yuan. And this reward, it was probably not simple. Lin Yuan hadn't received the system template for a long time. Even his bloodline was stuck at the water dragon realm for a long time. This dog system was like a dead body. It had even ignored Lin Yuan for a long time. If the system were to be upgraded this time, it would be equivalent to jumping from version 2.0 to version 3.0. He didn't know what kind of changes there would be, but if the system could break the restrictions of the rules at this time, it was obviously something good that could solve most of the problems. After all, breaking the rules was something that even the system had to pay a great price for. Furthermore, many of the mission rewards were definitely within its capabilities. Obviously, after weighing the pros and cons, the old schemer still made a compromise. After all, it understood Lin Yuan. It knew that in a situation where he was going to die anyway, Lin Yuan wouldn't let it off so easily. And no matter who got the secret of the Sky Martial world, it would become a great threat in the end. Therefore, it had to help Lin Yuan break through the situation. This time, the system would lose a lot of money. Taking a deep breath, Lin Yuan's heart moved. The power of incense surged and instantly pushed his attribute points to the peak. Ding! Host's attribute points have reached the peak of the desolate demon realm. The realm has been upgraded at the same time. Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the breakthrough mission. Mission rewards are being issued. Ding! Mission rewards have been issued. The system will enter an update. System functions will be temporarily shut down. A series of notifications sounded. Lin Yuan's heart moved and saw something like a progress bar. Lin Yuan was speechless. Are you King kidding me? The speed of the progress bar could be said to be extremely slow. From 0% to 0.001%, it took a full minute. In other words, if there were no accidents, this update would take a full week's time. And in this week's time, Lin Yuan's cultivation could be said to be at the peak of the desolate demon realm. desolate demon realm? In the past, in the Tianwu continent, he could be said to be a big boss. But whether it was the current Tianwu continent or the Endless Sea, such a cultivation could be said to be an ant among ants. Even now, any demon king could easily tear Lin Yuan to shreds. After all, without the support of the system, he couldn't use the power of incense. Dormant for 7 days? Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't make a complicated expression, his face would probably be extremely ugly at this moment. He had no problem. But the god worship sect had just been humiliated by Lin Yuan. Would they be able to stop? When the Endless Sea was unsealed, the demonic beasts in the outer sea would be restless. The heavenly court and the god worship sect would join hands to find trouble with him. The dragon bloodline demonic beasts wouldn't be able to do much, okay? Ignoring the demonic beasts in the outer sea for 1 or 2 days was nothing. But if he didn't care about worldly affairs for 3 to 5 days, the heavenly court would pounce on Lin Yuan like sharks that had smelled blood, trying to eat him up. Therefore, to Lin Yuan, if the system functions were shut down at this time, it would be no different from a serious backstab to him. Chapter 1209. However, strictly speaking, this was not considered a stab in the back. After all, the system had to pay a huge price for breaking the rules. If Lin Yuan died because of a little negligence, the system would probably vomit blood. It would definitely feel as aggrieved as when Hong Jun merged with the heavenly axiom. Jiao Yi, this king needs to cultivate in seclusion for a while to break through to the demon lord level. Pass down the order to let the dragon bloodline demon beasts fight freely. If there is nothing important, don't disturb this king. Lin Yuan left a telepathic message and retreated into the depths of the palace. He began to silently sort out his own condition. After all, he had not personally participated in a battle for a long time. He basically relied on the power of incense to fight against the enemy. Lin Yuan had not done that kind of fighting between life and death with his physical body and skills for a long time. Although there was no warning, it was always better to be prepared. At the same time, far away in the northern frontier, Li Zhong clenched his fists. His black and white eyes were filled with streaks of blood. A battle report that had just been sent not long ago directly provoked the anger of the king of the northern frontier. The demon beasts of the Hengduan mountain range came out of the grassland from the east and killed everyone in sight. They destroyed countless tribes and killed countless Shuangjian barbarian. However, things did not end as Li Zhong had expected. The demon beasts of the Hengduan mountain range swept across the grassland as if they were plowing the land. Whether it was the Shuangjian barbarian, the withered tree cavalry, or the northern frontier army, they were all attacked by the beast tide. The situation on the other two sides had not been investigated. However, on the northern frontier side, they had lost contact with 2 legions of 50,000 people. Nearly 200,000 soldiers were trapped in the grassland, bitterly resisting the endless beast tide. This was not in the F***king plan at all. These demon beasts of the Hengduan mountain range did not obediently follow Lin Yuan's plan. Instead, they treated the Frost Mirror grassland as their own paradise. As long as they appeared in the Frost Mirror grassland, no matter which force was behind them, they would be attacked crazily by the beast tide. Damn it! Li Zhong slammed his fist on the table in front of him. His face was so gloomy that it almost dripped water. Even if all 300,000 soldiers were lost, it would not be a big deal for the current northern frontier. However, the problem was that a great change had occurred in the Withered Wood dynasty. The exalted Lord of Slaughter and Salvation and the Cleansing Buddha were slaughtering people in a frenzy. It was said that they had even used an evil technique to extract the souls of the people they killed and turn them into demons and monsters. They had also refined their corpses into puppet-like demonic corpses. Currently, the Withered Wood dynasty could be said to be overrun by fiendish demons. 9 out of 10 houses were empty. The imperial family of the Withered Wood dynasty, which was also the most powerful sect of the Withered Wood dynasty, had also fallen 8 hours ago. However, the sect master who had died had been refined into a corpse demon. He once again sat on the dragon throne of the Withered Wood dynasty and commanded his subordinates. He claimed that he was the incarnation of great Emperor Zhou Juyin. Now, he had become the third most powerful sect of the Withered Wood dynasty. He was independent of the two demons, but his actions were even more cruel and ruthless. At the very least, the two devils only chose cultivators to kill and refine them into their subordinates. However, this great Emperor Zhou Juyin was even more ruthless. He directly formed an army of over 1 million demonic corpses. He did not even spare the mortals of the Withered Wood dynasty. The main reason why the Withered Wood dynasty was empty was because this great Emperor Zhou Juyin liked to kill and drink blood. The demonic corpses under his command captured living people for his enjoyment. Coupled with the fact that the demonic corpses had tough bodies and did not have souls, they were basically invincible among their peers. Their elite level was definitely not inferior to the Northern Frontier Army. In terms of fearlessness and obedience, they were even stronger than the Northern Frontier Army. Currently, the demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range wreaked havoc in the Frost Mirror Plains, but they did not cause much damage to the Northern Frontier. In fact, the number of demonic beasts that died in battle was much higher than the number of soldiers of the Northern Frontier. In terms of casualties, a soldier of the Northern Frontier would be able to kill at least 5 demonic beasts of the same level as him before he died. In the past, this was an achievement that no one dared to imagine. After all, demonic beasts were invincible in battle. However, there were many sides to every coin. The Hengduan mountain range was not the Northern Frontier's most troublesome enemy. The Withered Wood dynasty was. Currently, the demonic beasts of the Withered Wood dynasty were rampaging. The demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range had cut off the path to the Withered Wood dynasty. Unless the Northern Frontier could defeat the demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range in an extremely short amount of time, they would definitely not be able to go to the Withered Wood dynasty to support Qinfang and the survivors there. These demonic beasts really deserve to die. Li Zhong's muscles were trembling slightly. He gritted his teeth and said, "Pass down my orders. Push forward the entire eastern border. I want to open up a path to the Withered Wood dynasty within half a month. Anyone who dares to accept this order will immediately attack. If this succeeds, I guarantee that the general will be promoted by 3 ranks. When the time is right, he will be allowed to lead an army. If this fails, he will seal his cultivation and receive 300 beatings. If he doesn't die, he will be stripped of his military rank and have to start over as a new soldier." The commander of the prince's guards exchanged glances with Li Zhong. He sensed Li Zhong's murderous aura and shuddered subconsciously. Then he cupped his hands at Li Zhong and strode out of the prince's mansion in the Northern Frontier. As Li Zhong's orders spread through the various temporary camps in the Northern Frontier, countless people began to have ideas. Promotion, wealth, and the death of a wife. These were the 3 great joys of a middle-aged man. On the Northern Frontier, the only good thing was a promotion. After all, as long as one had hands and feet and was willing to work seriously, even if they didn't become rich, they could at least live a well-off life in the Northern Frontier. Lin Yuan also didn't have any intention of spreading the law of marriage. In other words, as long as one could raise a family, it wouldn't be a problem to marry as many wives as they wanted. Only a promotion. In the Northern Frontier, where there were so many talents, it was simply something that one could only dream of. In terms of cultivation talent, those who graduated early from the academies in the Northern Frontier were all geniuses. In terms of political and military achievements, the Northern Frontier was a land of 4 wars. Everyone's speed of accumulation was actually not slow. Under these circumstances, it was impossible for there to be so many empty positions waiting for you to be promoted. You either had to slowly accumulate experience or wait for an opportunity. Li Zhong's orders were an excellent opportunity. Being promoted 3 times in a row was not a small reward. For example, as long as a new recruit could complete this mission, he or she would be promoted to a deputy general. Even if his or her other achievements were not as good, he or she would still be promoted to a lieutenant, which was equivalent to becoming a boss of a region. Not to mention the other military ranks of the northern region, which were even higher ranked than the generals of the northern region. When all the people were rubbing their palms together, a strong man who was nearly 2 meters tall touched his nose and said with a smile, Is there a more suitable troop than our falling star army in the northern frontier for a surprise attack? Chapter 12:10. That's hard to say. The one who replied was a young man in his 20s. His eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. Although he was young, no one dared to underestimate him because his armor was as black as ink, and the word Blackwater was clearly engraved on his arm guard. He was the Blackwater Army, the personal army of the Dragon King in the northern frontier. Old Wang, your fallen star army should just take a shower and go to bed for this mission. The young man raised his eyebrows, and a hideous smile appeared on his handsome face. He said loudly, the Blackwater Army was restructured, and all the commanders of the battalions were captains. But now, if you have enough military merits, you can apply for a special designation. Although you are under the name of the Blackwater Army, it is no different from leading an army alone. Even if I don't compete with you, the other captains of the Blackwater Army won't be blind. Pumph. The brawny man snorted, and carried a pair of huge black axes on his shoulder. He sneered and said, blind or not, we'll see when we get to the battlefield. Anyway, I don't believe that there is anyone better than us in terms of assault. If there was someone present, they would definitely recognize these two men. Cui Qingtai of the Fallen Star Army, Level 7 Heavengang Realm. He was born with great strength, and he once tore apart demonic beasts of the same level. The pair of axes in his hands were also specially made by the Ministry of Works. If an ordinary person could use one of them, he or she would be a hero. But in his hands, they were just two one-handed axes. It was said that Gao Buzhan thought highly of Cui Qingtai, and intended to train him as his successor. After all, although Gao Chuanzhen was in his prime, he had served in the Fallen Star Army in his early years. As the champion of the army, he had to fight in the front line. His body was covered with injuries. If it were someone with a lower cultivation base, they would have died a long time ago. Plus, Yan Xingqi was already dead. Gao Chuanzhen already had the intention to leave. If it weren't for the fact that he had to leave the name of the Fallen Star Army, he would have already asked Li Zhong to leave. Li Xiancan of the Blackwater Army was a level 9 Heaven Dipper realm warrior. Although he didn't have any special talent, he was calm and cautious. He could command the three armies from the rear, and he could also seize the flag. He was now the most dazzling new star in the Blackwater Army and was about to catch up with Zhao Guangchong to become the most ruthless man in the Blackwater Army. As for the Blackwater Army, there were 4 special names, which were the Azure Dragon, the Black Tortoise, the White Tiger, and the Rosefinch. Each special name was equal to the authority to lead an army. As the Blackwater Army continued to expand, the size of the special names would also increase. If it was necessary, they could even leave the Blackwater Army and form a new army. The Azure Dragon Army would be the main commander, which would completely replace the Northern Army. The Northern Army would become a secondary army, responsible for the local security. The Black Tortoise Army would be the main commander, which would complement the Azure Dragon camp. However, their main responsibility was to suppress the demonic beasts in the Hengduan mountain range and the various Sumeru worlds and mysterious realms that Lin Yuan had discovered in the northern frontier. This was to prevent the northern frontier from being defenseless when something unexpected happened. The White Tiger Army was in charge of killing. They were responsible for entering the Hengduan mountain range and Sumeru worlds and slaughtering the species that were bred in them to ensure the normal operation of those places. At the same time, they would not allow the enemy to expand too much and affect the development of the northern frontier. Lastly, the Rosefinch Army was in charge of annihilation. It would be the army that carried out the fewest missions but the most difficult missions in the Blackwater Army in the future. They were mainly responsible for all external battles, including but not limited to destroying other dynasties and uncontrollable Sumeru worlds. Li Xiancan had his eyes on the name of the Rosefinch Army. At the very least, he had to get the name of the White Tiger. After all, it was widely rumored in the Blackwater Army that he was the little Zhao Guangchong, and Zhao Guangchong was the big Li Xiancan. It was not that he did not respect his seniors, but the army had always respected the strong. When the gap between them was not large, no one would be willing to be under someone else for the rest of their life, let alone a soldier. Li Xiancan and Zhao Guangchong were members of the Blackwater Army in the same batch. Their cultivation, military rank, age, and aptitude were about the same. However, because Zhao Guangchong had become famous earlier, Li Xiancan was like a junior imitating his seniors. This made him very vexed. Therefore, he had made up his mind to get the special designation, and he had to get it before Zhao Guangchong. In the future, people would call Zhao Guangchong Little Li Xiancan. How comfortable would that be? Come on, Li Xiancan. Don't argue with me here. Cui Qingtai sneered. He rolled his eyes and said, "Don't forget that Zhao Guangchong and his subordinates are now on the Frost Mirror Grassland. I reckon that while you are still thinking of a battle plan, they have already set off with their men. When you and your brothers arrive, you will be helping Zhao Guangchong clean up the battlefield." It had to be said that Cui Qingtai was nearly 2 meters tall and had bulging muscles. He looked like a human-shaped bear, but when it came to playing tricks, he was not bad at all. Hearing this, Li Xuansan's expression changed. He turned and ran back to his encampment. As he ran, he shouted, "You stupid bull! If I don't make it in time for this battle, I will beat you up until you can't walk for half a month." After Li Xiancan left, the sneer on Cui Qingtai's face gradually disappeared. He joked, "Hey, little brat, if those demon beasts were so easy to deal with, would the king of the northern frontier give such an order? Do you think it's so easy to be promoted by 3 ranks? Forget it, with your IQ, you should obediently go to our fallen star army. When the time comes, I will share some of the soup with you." However, what Cui Qingtai did not know was that after leaving his line of sight, the anxiety on Li Xuansan's face also quickly disappeared. He sneered, "You stupid bull, do you really think I fell for your provocation? If you dare to follow me to the border, I will show you the unique skill of the front army turning into the rear army. Let's see who will be the one to take the thunder." If an instructor from the Northern Frontier Military Academy was here, he would probably be speechless. These 2 idiots applied to the military academy. It was king waste of talent. If you like to scheme so much, are you sure you don't want to study at the military academy for 2 years? What the hell did you learn? Li Xiancan and Cui Qingtai were just a microcosm of the current Northern Frontier military. Everyone was eagerly waiting for Li Zhong's order. It was just like how the emperor in Lin Yuan's previous life would post an imperial notice and invite doctors to treat his illness. Regardless of whether there were dates or not, everyone would be happy if they won. If they lost, they would have to start all over again. However, there was one thing. The demon beasts in the Hengduan mountain range had really touched the bottom line of the northern frontier. From Li Zhong to the recruits, almost everyone was filled with killing intent toward the demon beasts in the Frost Mirror Grassland. Even the demon beasts that were galloping in the Frost Mirror Grassland did not know how terrifying they were about to face. Chapter 12:11. The change in the Hengduan Mountains was obviously beyond everyone's expectations. Even the assassin, who had planned all of this, slapped his head hard. Damn it, why? He had gone through a lot of trouble to find 2 suitable carriers and paid such a huge price to secretly transport some water from the Netherblood Sea under the nose of old ancestor Yang Mei. He had even stolen a trace of Hanba's origin corpse chi. Only then was he able to cultivate the 2 ferocious corpses, Heavenly Venerable Pudu the Killer and World-Cleansing Buddha. In the end, before the Withered Tree Empire completely collapsed, a corpse king that was not inferior to them was born and formed a new Withered Tree Empire. Although this new Withered Tree Empire was a corpse demon version, the problem was that the new corpse king was also holding back the slaughtering Heavenly Lord Pudu and the purifying Buddha. The current Withered Tree Empire could be said to be a tripartite balance of forces. Although the demons were rampant and there was no place for the living to stand, it still did not achieve the effect of collapse that he had expected. This also meant that the northern frontier could still maintain the original strategy. Therefore, in a moment of desperation, Baigon had even made preparations to leave the Withered Tree Empire to the Corpse King and let the purifying Buddha and the slaughtering Heavenly Lord lead the controlled corpse demon army to the northern frontier and turn the northern frontier into a purgatory on Earth. The result? Good heavens! The people he had sent to the Withered Tree Empire to deliver the message were torn to shreds by the Hungduan Mountains beast tide halfway through the journey. As for refining the demon beasts of the Hungduan Mountains into corpse demons, even Baigon did not dare to think about it. After all, the demon beasts' bodies were too strong, and their immunity in all aspects was also directly maxed out. The price and time spent to refine a demon beast into a corpse demon was enough to refine thousands of humans of the same level into corpse demons. Unless Hanba came personally, otherwise, it was almost an impossible task to refine a demon beast into a corpse demon. The Hungduan Mountains beast tide was not something the current corpse demon army could contend against. Perhaps even the clan leaders who started this beast tide did not know about it. Their actions could be said to have angered the public, directly destroying the plans of the northern frontier and the heavenly court, making both sides angry. An hour later, the Great Wall of the northern frontier was opened. A large number of armored soldiers with sharp blades passed through the ruined pass and charged at the demon beasts that were wreaking havoc on the Frost Mirror grassland. Even the smallest of these troops was led by a field captain, while the larger ones were at the level of an army. To the officers of the northern frontier who had climbed to the middle and upper ranks, a promotion of 3 ranks was a huge temptation. After all, Li Zhong had no intention of restricting the original ranks of the participants. Therefore, the scope of operation of the various troops was greatly expanded. After all, when a recruit was promoted by 3 ranks, it would only be a recruit becoming a lieutenant. At this stage, as long as they were willing to work hard, their promotion wouldn't be too slow. But if the guard general was promoted 3 times in a row, wouldn't he be able to take flight? Under this kind of atmosphere, almost every army's bounty was directly maxed out. If someone observed the Frost Mirror grassland carefully, they would see that there were killings everywhere. The troops of the northern frontier were encircling and suppressing the beast tide, and the beast tide was attacking the barracks of the northern frontier. In some places, the demon beasts of the Hungduan Mountains were still killing each other. Even the grassland wolf tribe that had been hiding from the world for a long time came out and encircled a large territory on the Frost Mirror grassland. Not to mention the Frost Mirror grassland, even the Donglin city and other places that were slightly behind could smell the pungent smell of blood. Almost every day, countless disciples of the School of Medicine were on standby at the northern frontier. Anyone who had some common knowledge about medicine knew that, if left alone for a long time, it was hard to say what kind of evils the uncollected corpses and the soaring blood would breed, but a plague that was enough to destroy mortals and low-level cultivators was unavoidable. The troops of the northern frontier and the demon beasts that were fighting on the grassland didn't really care. After all, their cultivation was still there. The plague would only make them feel a little uncomfortable and unable to exert their full combat ability. However, the School of Medicine was worried that the terrifying plague might accidentally spread to the northern frontier when the soldiers were relieved of their duties. Otherwise, even if the demon beasts of the Hungduan Mountains attacked the northern frontier directly, they wouldn't be able to cause the losses that the plague would bring. In the sky, a figure with disheveled hair was standing in the clouds. Her gray eyes were rolling slightly, and she glanced at the grassland that was strewn with corpses. Even with her temperament, she almost lost control of her rationality and rushed down to feast. After suppressing her bloodlust with great difficulty, Hanba's gray eyes regained their clarity. After muttering to herself for a moment, she cast her gaze in the direction of the northern frontier. She muttered, "What's going on? Did that black Jiao not receive my message?" Myths were actually very mysterious. Just like how the true path of cultivation was to absorb the power of incense, the more believers one had, the more powerful the legend would be. As the saying went, man strives for a breath, Buddha strives for a stick of incense. There were stories of immortals and Buddhas fighting until the sun and moon lost their light for a stick of incense. In the original legends, the true zombie progenitor was her, Hanba. She was personally refined by the Yellow Emperor into the world's first zombie in order to deal with the great formation of bitter wind and bitter rain. As the later generations continued to change, she went from the original heavenly goddess Hanba to the Hanba that everyone hated. And that wasn't the end. What was even more ridiculous was that people had created 3 other zombie progenitors, namely Ingo, Ho-Ching, and Jiangchen. They were all as strong as her, and had been created from nothing to become one of the 4 zombie progenitors. But the truly terrifying thing was that, over the course of countless years, Hanba discovered that the other 3 zombie progenitors really did appear in the primitive world. Humans had always been the subjects that deities and Buddhas fought over. It wasn't just because they could provide the power of incense, but because they could indeed create gods and become gods. Thus, the existing deities and Buddhas had to make humans believe in them. It wasn't just for the sake of becoming stronger, but more so because they didn't want the world to have more deities and Buddhas. Moreover, the disciples of the Confucian sect who respected Hongzhuan's decree were even more extreme in their prohibition against becoming gods. In other words, Confucius did not speak of strange powers or gods. This sentence could be interpreted in any way. In Lin Yuan's previous world, during the Age of Chaos, this was called rejecting feudal superstitions. In an era where demons ran rampant, this was called lying through one's teeth. The main purpose was to tell the world that it was enough to just believe in the existing deities and Buddhas. There was no need to make up stories about strange immortals and ghosts. Even stories about demons and monsters seeking to become gods didn't end well for humans who followed the demons' wishes. Even a serious illness would be considered a good thing. Chapter 12:12. However, as the Yellow Emperor's beloved daughter, Hanba was one of the 4 zombie progenitors alongside the other 3. According to ancient records, Hanba could still evolve into a Ho. What kind of existence was Ho? It was one of the first life forms born after Pan-Gu split open the skies. According to the legends, Ingo and Ho-Ching had been tricked by Dunglong's soul into becoming the zombie progenitors. Jiangchen had also become the zombie progenitor after combining with Roar's corpse. In a world where the laws of the underworld were clear, the relationship between the undead and the undead was extremely simple. The undead were forever the slaves of the transformed. This was the new ability that Jiangchen had given the zombies. Most of the zombies in movies and TV series were the descendants of Ho-Ching and Jiangchen. Although Hanba and Ingo both gave the Yellow Emperor a lot of trouble, they had no intention of expanding the zombie race. Instead, after Ho-Ching's death, they established one of the rules that allowed zombies to truly reproduce. That is, anyone who died with a grudge could become a zombie. Jiangchen's unique ability to spread corpse poison by sucking blood and turning those who were sucked into his own slaves. It was another rule that allowed zombies to reproduce. Although Hanba hadn't reached the stage of transforming into a Ho, countless years had passed. She was now unfathomable. Even a quasi-sage expert might not be able to do anything to her. Therefore, Hitorigami was very clear that in such an environment, once Baigan released his corpse chi, it would at least give birth to a large number of flying zombies and wandering zombies. If luck was particularly bad, it might even give birth to unmelted skeletons. Everlasting skeletons were the highest level zombies could reach. At this level, they were immortal and indestructible. They truly transcended the 3 realms, 5 elements, and 6 paths of reincarnation. Even immortals in the heavens would fear them. But what was that Black Jiao doing now? She clearly knew that Baigan had already unleashed his source corpse chi, yet he was still fighting a fierce battle with a demon beast at the Frost Mirror Grassland so close to the Withered Wood dynasty. Under the temptation of the smell of blood, even she could barely restrain herself. If an evil spirit was born, even the Black Flood Dragon would be forced to use its trump card, and it might not even be able to deal with the evil spirit. When it came to bloodthirsty desires, Hitorigami felt a little helpless. In the beginning, zombies didn't drink blood or eat meat. Instead, they fed on resentment, baleful energy, and yin energy. However, with a series of upheavals in the future, in some movies, TV series, novels, and so on, zombies and vampires were mixed together, forming a new terrifying image. After the legend began to spread, the impact caused by this was that zombies really began to feed on blood. Just like when she was scolded by countless people as the drought demon in the past, she really gained the magical power of thousands of miles of red land. Could it be? A hint of bewilderment flashed through Hitorigami's dead gray eyes. He muttered, that Black Jiao isn't at the northern frontier. Moreover, he hasn't been able to contact the northern frontier after receiving my message, right? It couldn't be that the Black Jiao wanted to use his corpse chi to cultivate an extremely terrifying corpse demon, could it? What a joke. Zombies were a collection of bad luck, resentment, and baleful energy. Anyone who was tainted with the karma of zombies would end up in a bad situation. Even the destiny of a human king couldn't suppress the corrosion of the corpse chi. Even if that Black Jiao had the guts to do something like this, right? In fact, Lin Yuan didn't have any intention of paying attention to the outside world at this moment. He just sat in his own palace, silently looking at the update progress bar that had exceeded 99%. There was a hint of helplessness in his eyes. The system hadn't moved for 10 king minutes. Did it crash when the update was almost done? Was it specially designed to mess with his mentality? However, the estimated time soon arrived, and the system's update progress bar was finally full. Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the system's version 3.0 update. This update will cancel a portion of the old functions, and at the same time unlock some new functions. The host still needs to explore the specific content himself. Next, the mission reward will be issued. Almost at the instant the system appeared, Lin Yuan suddenly felt as if a layer of shackles on his body had been broken. The world in front of him started to become incomparably clear. If he squinted his eyes slightly, he could even see the flow of heaven and earth's spiritual chi. From this moment onwards, Lin Yuan clearly realized that he had completed the evolution from mortal to immortal. If this was in a novel, the difference between a cultivator and an immortal was only one lightning tribulation. However, in reality, this was a leap in the level of life. The current Lin Yuan could no longer call himself a human, even if he shed his demonic body and revealed his human body. With a thought, the surrounding air began to explode. Layer after layer of terrifying power overflowed, as if announcing that an incomparably powerful, immortal, had descended upon the world. As a cultivator of the orthodox cultivation system, Lin Yuan could already achieve immortality after advancing from the desolate demon realm to the demon king realm. Compared to the evolution obtained by the natives of the Tianwu world through the castrated version of the cultivation method, as long as he could pass through the 3 calamities and 9 tribulations, he would be able to achieve immortality. There was no need for him to use the power of incense to maintain his existence. Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly. He suddenly realized a problem. The dragons of the Tianwu world should also be existences from the great desolate world. Moreover, there were several dragon gods who called themselves ancestral dragons. Furthermore, they had joined the ancient Fey court at its peak. Logically speaking, the dragons of the 4 seas should also cultivate the most orthodox cultivation method. Why were these ancestral dragons of the 4 seas also using the power of incense to maintain their immortality? Something's not right, something's not right. Lin Yuan lowered his head and muttered to himself. His eyes were somewhat gloomy. The dragons of the Tianwu world were like the great cultivators of the great desolate world in the early days of the great desolate world. They seemed to have immortality and could summon the wind and rain, but in reality, they cultivated crazily every day, accumulating magic power and sharpening their Tao hearts. Every 500 years, they would undergo the 3 calamities. If they could endure it, they would continue to endure it. If they could not, their souls would scatter. The only meaning of their existence was to spread their faith to Hongjun. Countless years later, Hongjun raised his hand, and, coincidentally, a few geniuses with extraordinary talent appeared and improved their cultivation method. These dragons of the 4 seas, either they did not come from the great desolate world, or they were hiding some big secret. It had to be known that in the myriad of worlds, the dragons were not only found in the great desolate world. However, no matter which world the dragons were from, they were definitely existences at the top of the food chain. In fact, most of the worlds were ruled by the dragons. Even the later humans had many inheritances from the dragons. Chapter 12:13. Logically speaking, the dragon race was an incomparably powerful race. No matter which world it was in, it would be an absolute powerhouse. Perhaps there were a few special life forms that could surpass the dragon race with their own strength, but in terms of overall quality, there was no race that could be compared to the dragon race. Would such a race be like the natives of the Tianwu world, losing their inheritance because of the world's restrictions and laws? False dragon. Thinking of this, two large words suddenly appeared in Lin Yuan's mind. For the current dragon race of the Four Seas, these two words were incomparably appropriate. Although the dragon race of the Tianwu world ruled the Endless Sea, suppressing the native monsters for countless years, the dragon race of the Four Seas had lost their inheritance. Even if they crazily talked about bloodlines, the dragon race of the Four Seas could be said to be incomparably thin. Lin Yuan, who was at the level of a flood dragon, in terms of bloodline density, was even above the Dragon King. Were these guys really from the dragon race? If not, where were the real dragon race now? Logically speaking, although Lin Yuan had never seen the whale race, they were able to dominate the Endless Sea, and even a member of the whale race could eat up all the life in the sea. In addition, there were huge sea monsters in the depths of the Endless Sea. Under such an environment, the whale race would definitely not lose to any other force. In a small world where strength was limited, the whale race was definitely an overlord existence. Every member was estimated to have touched the threshold of immortal. Just by relying on this group of false dragons? To put it bluntly, even the dragon gods worshipped in the Dragon God Palace were at best on the same level as the whale race. It was hard to say how many members of the whale race there were in their heyday. After all, the more powerful the race, the more difficult it was to reproduce. Unless it was a special race like the dragon race that did not have reproductive isolation and could give birth to children with any creature, their numbers would generally not be too many. However, to be able to rule the vast Endless Sea, their numbers would not be too small. If the dragon race of the Four Seas had conquered the Endless Sea, then the number of ancestral dragons worshipped in the Dragon God Palace would definitely not be less than thousands of ancestral dragons. Taking a deep breath, he hid this idea in his heart. Moreover, after the system update was completed, Lin Yuan always felt that there were several pairs of eyes staring at him from behind. However, Lin Yuan was unable to perceive any emotions from these lines of sight. It seemed that they were neither kind nor malicious to him, so Lin Yuan was unable to capture their existence. He only had a vague premonition. Even if his consciousness was immersed in them, the other party would quickly break off this link. It was impossible to determine the other party's identity at all. He just felt that they were very unfamiliar, but somewhat close. Could it be a real dragon? Hiding in the dark to observe me? Lin Yuan laughed involuntarily. However, he soon remembered the important matter. System, open my attribute panel. With a thought, Lin Yuan took the initiative to interact with the system. Attribute panel function activated. Identity verified. Name, Lin Yuan. Serial number, 021. Title, Devourer of National Fate. Status, Blackwater Nether Flood Dragon, mutated. Divine title, Northern Frontier Dragon King, unconferred. Divine power, 0 believers. 300000000 Joss Flame power, 321975800-1. The host has officially reached the celestial level. The attribute model has been removed. From now on, the various attributes of the host will no longer exist separately. The divine power column represents the host's current combat power. Every point of divine power is equivalent to the full power of a peak Baron Demon Realm expert. Note 2. Divine power is a one-time consumable item. It can be exchanged with Joss Flame power. The exchange rate is 1:10,000. Note 3. The number of believers of the host is only in round numbers. Every believer will provide the host with a point of Joss Flame power every day. Lin Yuan. For a moment, he did not know whether this update was good or bad for the original attribute model to be removed. However, according to the system's usual behavior, the so-called peak Baron Demon Realm was the average. In other words, it was the power of an ordinary demon beast after entering the Baron Demon Realm. It could not be compared to a special existence like Guan Zhaoshan. However, the flaw could not obscure the beauty of the jade. 1 point of Joss flame power was equivalent to the full power of a peak Baron Demon Realm expert. Then, if it exchanged all of its 320 million Joss flame power for divine power, it could probably destroy the heavens and earth with a single move. The only troublesome thing was that divine power could not be regenerated. It was like the water in a bucket. Once it was spilled, it would be spilled. It would not be placed anywhere, and a new bucket would appear after a while. This was the biggest difference between celestials and mortals. Ordinary demons and cultivators had an upper limit. However, the demonic power and earth energy in their bodies were renewable resources. Whether it was through consuming pills to recover or waiting for them to recover naturally, it would not be a big problem even if they exhausted all their energy. However, if celestials used up all of their Joss flame power, they would be as weak as a mortal. They were not good at prolonged and attritional battles. Lin Yuan suddenly understood the celestials that he had seen in movies and books in his previous life. They were either insufferably arrogant and used all kinds of methods to rule over humans, beating the so-called heroes and experts until they could not fight back at all. After a while, a weak mortal could kill them with a knife. A celestial that had exhausted all of his divine power was indeed worse than a mortal. Although Lin Yuan had broken through, if he did not exchange for divine power, he would not be much stronger than an ordinary black python. Lin Yuan suddenly widened his eyes. He thought again and growled, "Where the F***ck are my skills? Did you eat my skills?" The system first typed an ellipsis. After a while, the system explained faintly, "Skills." No, at this stage, only God ability level methods will be recorded in the system, and they will not be mixed together with the personal panel. If the host wants to check, then the God ability panel can be opened on your own. Open the divine power panel. Lin Yuan continued to communicate with the system. At the same time, his heart suddenly sank. Only divine power level methods will be recorded? Didn't this mean that many of his skills had been deleted? It should be known that although some skills could not be considered divine powers, if used properly, they were still quite powerful. For example, Curse Seal Poison, Void's Embrace. These were all skill level methods. They were purely some kind of force exertion technique or the secretion of poison through one's organs. However, without the skill panel, Lin Yuan could manually copy these skills. In theory, it was possible, but in reality, it was a big problem. Lin Yuan might not be unable to use special force exertion techniques. Chapter 12:14. But like Void Embrace, he had to accurately cut the space, hide his figure and breath, control the place where he appeared, and cause effective damage to the target. This skill could have even been used as a unique skill, but if Lin Yuan used it now, it was basically something that he could not accurately control and was doomed to fail. As for the curse mark poison, Lin Yuan had evolved this skill and poison gland. Even without the skill, he could still secrete the curse mark poison in theory. But this thing was like medicine. Once the combination of herbs changed, or even the ratio of herbs changed, the good medicine used to cure diseases and save people would instantly become a fatal poison. Lin Yuan could not control the ratio. After all, he did not need to poison anyone. He just needed to control some people who were temporarily useful through the curse mark poison. He had to control the dosage to ensure that he could kill the other party while suppressing the outbreak of the poison through the other party's strength. To deal with existences of different realms, the ratio of the curse mark poison was different. After losing the precise control of the system, Lin Yuan had to do a lot of crazy experiments if he wanted to continue using the curse mark poison. Magical ability panel activated. Identity verified. Dragon King's Eye can expand divine power to explore the surrounding environment. The more divine power invested, the larger the range of perception. Can detect the attributes of all creatures within the range of perception. There is a certain chance of failure. Failure will cause the other party to view you with hostility or even hatred. King of Water, omitted formless ice, omitted blood sacrifice prayer, omitted celestial body. the host can control the size of his body at will and obtain bonuses according to his current form. For example, if the host shrinks his body, it will bring a bonus in agility and reaction. If the host shrinks his body, it will bring a bonus in strength and defense. The specific bonus value will change according to the divine power invested by the host. Dragon power, omitted Nether River control. As the host kills more and more creatures, the originally small water droplet has now become a large river. Any existence that is caught in it will become the host's most loyal servant. The host can spend divine power to summon Nether River creatures out of thin air. The host can also spend a large amount of divine power to fix the Nether River in a certain place in the current world and summon Nether River creatures unconditionally. All things have soul, omitted, Roaming Dragon's 9 transformations. A treasure manual that integrates soft attacks, movement techniques, power dissipation, cultivation, and other aspects into one. As long as the user receives the host's approval, the user will be able to cultivate the Roaming Dragon's 9 transformations, regardless of the user's species or cultivation level. However, the host will have to pay a corresponding amount of divine power for each person it imparts to. Lin Yuan, WDNMD. This damned system had kept his innate ability and turned it into a divine ability. But in reality, there wasn't much change. Furthermore, it had added a prerequisite of consuming divine power. This kind of behavior could be described in one sentence: reaching out for money from under the coffin. What was even more frightening was that this bastard had directly deleted all of his skills. If he wanted to use skills in the future, he could only use his own consciousness to perform microcontrol. Who knew how long it would take for him to perfectly replicate those skills? After the update, the system became stronger, but the requirement for the power of incense had increased. In terms of actual combat, Lin Yuan had exchanged the power of incense for divine power. Not only was the power of the power more powerful, but it could also reduce wastage. After all, if one wanted to directly mobilize the power of incense to achieve the effect of divine power, there would be a loss of close to 30% of the power in the process of releasing it. However, the updated system had indeed dealt a heavy blow to Lin Yuan. To him, who did not have a large source of incense, this was like a thunderstorm. Out of the 30 million power of incense a day, most of them were system creatures created by the gray-scaled flood dragon person and Lin Yuan. It was estimated that there were only a few million existences who truly believed in Lin Yuan and treated Lin Yuan as a god. To the current northern frontier with a population of over 10 billion, this ratio was so low that it made one's hair stand on end. Letting out a long sigh, an indescribable expression flashed across Lin Yuan's eyes. After a short moment, he once again communicated with the system telepathically, saying, "You've paid such a great price. Could it be that you're just trying to exploit some incense from me?" Patience. You must be patient. In this update, the system has brought the host a very important function, the trading market. If the system had a physical body, it would probably have rolled its eyes by now. Lin Yuan was silent for a moment. Then he casually waved his flood dragon tail and said, "Open the trading market. I'd like to see what kind of model you're so fond of." The system update this time was most likely because of what Lin Yuan had said earlier. Therefore, the system had paid a certain price to undergo an update. While it might not be able to break the current situation, it would definitely give Lin Yuan a chance to break the current situation. Therefore, this trading market was probably not simple. It might even be one of the core functions of the system. The trading market has been opened. Identity verification is correct. As the system once again displayed these words, Lin Yuan could not help but frown slightly. He said, "Identity verification? What does that mean?" Regardless of whether it was his personal interface, the mystical abilities interface, or the trading market now, the system always seemed to say something before it was opened. The current version 3.0 system is different from before. The biggest difference can be understood by the host as the difference between a network and a standalone system. In version 3.0, the host can pay incense power to customize a subsystem, which is the previous version 2.0 system. The host can also install the subsystem to others according to the host's wishes. The price of customization is 1 million incense power. After each customization, the price of the next customization will double. The life form that obtains the subsystem will have the same authority as the host. The host is equivalent to the server and can issue missions, rewards, and punishments, but must abide by the restrictions of the rules. Unless the host voluntarily pays a price to temporarily block the perception of the rules, the mission will fail. At the same time, the host can also set up an AI assistant for the subsystem. According to the host's aptitude, temperament, and other factors, the host can create a personal growth plan for them. The subsystem will issue goals, missions, and so on. Of course, the rewards of the missions will be paid by the host, or by the system using incense power. With the separation of the main system and the subsystem, the authority will change. In order to prevent bugs, the identity verification is required every time the function of version 3.0 is activated. If the authority is insufficient, the function will fail, and the system will issue missions to other hosts to carry out erasure. Therefore, verifying the identity before activating the model is to protect the host's rights. Chapter 12:15. After hearing the system's explanation, Lin Yuan subconsciously nodded and did not continue to dwell on this matter. Regarding the system's functions, it could be said that it was reasonable, but also unexpected. Even Lin Yuan himself did not think that the system would actually give him such authority. This was no different from handing over the system's core to him. However, after thinking about it carefully, the other hosts probably did not have such authority. After all, after the system's update, what kind of room it opened was completely up to the system. It was not a real AI, it was just pretending to be the system's seed to help it quickly grow. Even if the system was updated, it would still make changes according to the host's potential, rating, and style, just like how it made plans for every host's growth. And the reason why Lin Yuan received this privilege, it was completely because the system saw hope in him to defeat Hongjun. In addition, Lin Yuan had always been obedient and did not listen to the system. Only when there was a win-win situation would Lin Yuan do it without hesitation. If it was like what the system had thought before, it would obviously abandon Lin Yuan and still want Lin Yuan to fight for the Sky Marshal World's secret mission. Lin Yuan would rather die than do that. Therefore, the relationship between the system and Lin Yuan was one where the system was strong and Lin Yuan was weak, but it was not a master-servant relationship. Now, Lin Yuan already had the ability to create God power after leaving the system. Naturally, the relationship between the two of them was not one of strength and one of weakness. It could be said that they were absolutely equal partners. The system needed Lin Yuan to deal with Hongjun. Lin Yuan needed the system to provide convenience. In addition, Lin Yuan cultivated the life scripture, which was one of the reasons why the system took the initiative to give him this privilege. There were only so many resources in a world. Even the system itself had to follow the model of one host in one world. However, Lin Yuan could continuously cultivate living beings to plunder other worlds. Firstly, it could train, and secondly, it could strengthen the Sky Marshal World. With the system's help, these living beings would be like fish in water in other worlds. When Lin Yuan became strong, he would naturally become the main force against Hongjun. While attracting most of the firepower from the great desolate world, it would also give the system time and space to cultivate other hosts. Thinking about that, Lin Yuan no longer hesitated and said, "All right, tell me about the functions of the exchange." The exchange, as the name suggests, is a virtual space opened up by the system for the hosts to trade. However, it is different from the system's previous transactions. The price of the items in the exchange and the number of merchants are all up to the host to decide. The system will only collect the transportation fee for the items sent. Other than that, there will be no other interference. The host serial number is 021. Because the host is the 21st to upgrade to version 3.0, that is to say, in the current exchange, only the 21 of you have the right to trade. However, this does not mean that the other hosts are unable to trade. The other hosts' goods will also enter the exchange. However, the price of these goods will be set by the system. The same goes for the transaction price. After the transaction is successful, the supplier of the goods will not receive any benefits, because before the transaction, the system has already bought out all the goods. What a guy! Hearing that, Lin Yuan directly called him an expert. What the hell is this? This was an otherworldly fantasy version of a high-tech profiteer. Other than Lin Yuan, who was aware of the system's original identity, the other hosts probably thought that they were the protagonists of novels. Even if they communicated with the system, they probably thought that it was a cold, intelligent program. Whatever price the system gave, they would sell it. They would not even think of bargaining with the system. Plus, they really did not need those things, so they would definitely sell them. When the system later listed these things in the exchange, good lord, 100 times profit would probably be a good price. May there be no profiteers in heaven. After teasing the system, Lin Yuan's blue and white eyes flashed. The next moment, it was as if a sea of stars appeared in Lin Yuan's eyes. If one stared at it closely, one could even see the flickering of stars. At the same time, Lin Yuan's consciousness had also arrived in a strange space. To his left, right, and even behind him was a vast expanse of darkness. There was only a huge, brightly lit market in front of him. It was antique and did not have any modern vibes. It was like a bustling market in ancient times. There were only shops with a dazzling lineup of goods, and the streets outside the shops were densely packed with people. Dangerous. Very dangerous. Lin Yuan only glanced at the densely packed crowd and felt his scalp go numb. He even had a premonition that any one of these people had the strength to casually kill him. In other words, any one of these people could easily kill an immortal. These people didn't seem to be surprised by his sudden appearance. They continued to walk slowly on the street. Some of them even entered the shops to choose goods. They didn't bargain at all. If they fancied something, they would directly go to the counter to trade. From time to time, there would be people who disappeared. Didn't you say that including me, only 21 people have opened the exchange? I didn't tell you that I was the one who created this trading market. Lin Yuan, WNMD. The system's words almost choked him to death. Good lord, it's not even your F***king thing. How can you treat it as a major update for version 3.0? When it comes to shamelessness, I won't even support a wall. I admire you. Let me reintroduce it to you. The exchange is a special space that exists in the sea of misery. It is still a mystery who created it. However, you can understand every shop here as the owner behind it is the heavenly axiom of a world. The employees are like the chosen ones, like the host. If you are willing, I can also pay you a generous monthly salary. The condition is that you work in my shop. The specific work content depends on what position you are assigned to. If you lack incense and a stable source, I suggest you consider it. Oh, right, you can't enter this space physically. Even existences like Yang Mei and Hong Jun can't. Anyone who enters the exchange can only use their consciousness. It is not impossible to fight here, but it is basically a battle of divine power and consciousness. For those who only have strong physical bodies, it is a hellish existence. Fortunately, killing and robbing are not allowed here. Otherwise, races like the witch tribe with strong physical bodies but no primordial spirit would not dare to come here. Chapter 12:16. Lin Yuan? Fighting here was a battle between divine power and divine consciousness. Lin Yuan could understand this point. Because Lin Yuan was not in the body of a flood dragon now, but the appearance of his previous life. He was a tall and well-proportioned young man with an above-average appearance. He was wearing an expensive handmade suit, which was the outfit he wore when his company went public in his previous life. After rising to glory, he was attacked by his enemies by any means necessary, and his subsequent life was like a nightmare. Therefore, Lin Yuan had long realized that he was only a consciousness in the trading market. But the system's words, he could enter here without a primordial spirit? But soon, Lin Yuan felt relieved. Not having a primordial spirit did not mean that he did not have consciousness. You're right. In this space, all existences are bodies of consciousness. If you're killed here, you'll only lose a strand of consciousness. It won't hurt you. However, you still have to abide by the rules here. This is because all the shops here are opened by the heavenly axioms of various worlds. They're for the sake of mutual exchange and bringing in trends. If you casually fight here and ruin other people's business, you will be boycotted by the heavenly Tao of each world. At that time, even if you are not tainted by karma, you will be haunted by misfortune until you die. Only immortal saints who have cultivated thousands of tribulations can save their lives. Of course, if you are not killed, this misfortune will be shared equally with your subordinates and relatives. For specific details, you can refer to the Western sect. However, if you have a conflict with others here, it is not impossible to solve it. For example, there is a huge arena in the center of this space. As long as you pay a certain amount of spiritual items or divine power, you can enter the arena. The arena manager will take the handling fee, but if you can win, the other party's payment will still belong to you. In addition to resolving conflicts and grievances, this arena will also often hold competitions. There is even a special boxing arena. It is similar to the boxing arena in Hong Kong's Jiulong walled city in your previous life. The geniuses of each world will often participate in similar arenas. Although a consciousness will be destroyed if you die here, it can also sharpen your divine consciousness and nourish your primordial spirit. Moreover, as long as you do not participate too frequently, your life will not be in danger. If you are interested, you can also try. That arena is also. Lin Yuan raised his eyebrows and looked in the direction of the arena. That's not it. It's said that when this space appeared, the arena already existed. It should have been set up by the one who created this space. Although I don't know what that person's original purpose was, this is its current function. As for the arena manager, it's just an AI program left behind by that person. We have no right to interfere with the arena. At most, some heavenly axiom would set up a boxing arena to earn some divine power to nurture their chosen one. Oh! Lin Yuan nodded and walked into the market. Standing outside the trading market and inside the trading market were two completely different experiences. Almost the moment Lin Yuan stepped into the trading market, he felt an invisible pressure enveloping him. When he subconsciously raised his head to see where this pressure came from, he only saw dark clouds. From time to time, he could see lightning surging, but not a drop of rain fell. There was also no thunder in his ears. It was as if the dark clouds above his head were just an illusion. That is the heavenly tribulation thundercloud. It is also something that has existed in this space since ancient times. I have seen many foreign existences who have mistakenly entered and wanted to devour the consciousness that entered the trading market and robbed the goods sold in various shops. In the end, they were directly annihilated by the heavenly tribulation thundercloud. Even the existence of a saint was directly annihilated, and it is the kind that can't be reborn. Therefore, everyone unanimously believes that the existence who created this space is probably above the saints. It is even a great existence that can stand shoulder to shoulder with the 3,000 great Tao. Not to mention us heavenly axioms, even the ancient gods and demons who are carriers of the great Tao would probably not be able to withstand one move from that existence. This is also an important factor for this space to be able to become a trading market. No one can cause trouble here. Moreover, the heavenly tribulation thunderclouds in various worlds are actually clumsy imitations of the heavenly axioms of various worlds. The Eldritch world is still okay. After all, it is a world that contains the 3,000 great Tao. It is much stronger than the ordinary upper-class world. Therefore, there are 3 disasters and 9 disasters. It is not like the ordinary world, where there is only heavenly tribulation from beginning to end, an existence above the saints? A thunderbolt annihilated a saint? This was not done by the other party personally. Just a heavenly tribulation thundercloud left in this space had such power. Hearing this, Lin Yuan's eyes suddenly lit up. The existence who created this space was really terrifying. However, such an existence was incomparably fascinating. Strolling in the market, Lin Yuan's gaze swept across the shops. The surprise in his eyes became more and more intense. The goods here could be described as a dazzling lineup. The small ones were useless decorations, The big ones were heaven-destroying treasures, and even the items that could help cultivators comprehend the great Tao were not few in number. Compared to this, the Tianwu world's goods were pitifully low. It was estimated that it would only be better after the Tianwu world became a medium-class world. At that time, the world's level would be higher, and the heaven and earth spiritual objects it nurtured would be better. However, the Tianwu world's heavenly Tao had not been born yet, so it was not necessary to talk about this. The Tianwu world did not even have the qualifications to be looked down upon. What surprised Lin Yuan the most was that this space actually had the existence of a mercenary guild and a slave market. The former's existence also meant that as long as you could pay for it, you could quickly obtain the loyalty of a large number of experts. Although the quality was uneven, Lin Yuan was certain that if the Tianwu world became a medium-class world, such a group of mercenaries would descend from the sky and instantly sweep the world. However, Lin Yuan was only surprised for a moment. After all, by borrowing the power of the system, he could directly summon other hosts to help him. Similarly, by paying the same amount of divine power or Joss flames, the helpers he summoned were not only stronger, but also more reassuring. In any case, everyone was truly on the same side. As for the slave market, although this thing had a misleading name, it was actually not anything improper. It mainly sold the young of special species from various worlds. By buying a batch of young and bringing them back to his own world, he could expand the food chain. If it was a mutated creature that had been domesticated since young, it could provide a considerable amount of strength when it matured. After a rough glance, Lin Yuan once again walked forward. According to the system's notification, its shop was not far away. Chapter 12:17. The shops Lin Yuan saw before were similar to small houses on both sides of a street. However, the system's shop was built at the end of the street. In other words, the original road forked in front of the system's shop, extending in a shape. Moreover, the system's shop was not a small house. Instead, it was an octagonal building that was 11 stories high and looked very colorful. In an instant, the style of the building was full. When he saw the system's shop, Lin Yuan finally realized how powerful the Eldritch world was. Those who could open a shop in this space were basically the heavenly Tao of a world. Although the size of the shops he saw along the way were different, the layout of the bungalows was completely different compared to the octagonal building. Lin Yuan glanced along the two forked streets. Most of them were also buildings. They could not be compared to the system's shop. They were either not as luxurious as the octagonal building, or not as tall as the octagonal building. They could only be said to be much better than the bungalows from before. Moreover, in terms of geographical location, none of them could be compared to the octagonal building. As everyone knew, there was only the world will in a minor kiliacosm at most. It could not be separated into the 3 realms and 6 paths. Therefore, those bungalows and shops should be in the middle kiliacosm, and the buildings should be in the greater kiliacosm. The Eldritch world's heavenly Tao belonged to the unique existence in the greater kiliacosm. Moreover, this was only an incomplete source of the Eldritch world's heavenly Tao. It was an existence similar to a stray dog. In comparison, the Eldritch world's heavenly Tao at its peak was definitely an existence that could beat everything in this space. Taking a deep breath, Lin Yuan stepped into the octagonal building. With just a glance, Lin Yuan's movements became slightly stiff. The smell of a profiteer hit him in the face. There were only 2 employees on the first floor of the octagonal building. One stood in front of the counter to collect the bill, and the other stood quietly in front of a machine. The shelves around them were filled with a dazzling collection of colorful balls of light of different sizes. Lin Yuan? What's there to be surprised about? Haven't you seen stone gambling before? My way of playing is similar. The light balls here are all spiritual items from various worlds. It is the same from the first floor to the 4th floor. The color and size of the light balls are different, and the items inside are also different. However, the good-looking big light balls might contain trash, while the dim small light balls might contain treasures. Do you want to play a few rounds? Hearing this, Lin Yuan suddenly felt a little speechless. In his previous life, he was also a member of the business world. There was only one sentence that could sum up the profession of a businessman: all businessmen are evil, and all businessmen are evil. However, Lin Yuan really had never seen such a profiteer like the system. In his previous life, there was indeed a saying of stone gambling. According to the size, origin, texture, and so on, one could determine whether there was jade or gemstone inside a raw stone. Some people became rich overnight, while others lost everything. Although 8 out of 10 people who gambled on stones lost money, at most, they did not bring out the real good stones. Moreover, considering the reputation, they would always find a few people to support them. Occasionally, there would be a lucky person. Moreover, on a technical level, they really could not control whether or not every raw stone could contain gemstones or jade. Things like experience often hurt people. However, the system's things were different. The balls of light wrapped around these goods were the power of the heavenly axiom, which was also converted from divine power. Ordinary people could not pry into them, but as for what was inside, it all depended on the system's mood. It was possible to spend tens of millions of divine power to open a red belly band. Anyway, the system used the power of the heavenly axiom to wrap the goods. If it wanted to, it could package the trash in any way it wanted. Moreover, it seemed that the shops here all displayed all kinds of goods in an orderly manner. No one played like the system. Only the heavens knew how many people this octagonal building had cheated. Lin Yuan's mouth twitched slightly. He said somewhat helplessly, "You didn't call me over just to tell me how much of a profiteer you are, right? Stinking brat, biting Lu Dongbin like a dog. You don't know how to appreciate good intentions." The system's quality displayed a sentence to Lin Yuan. Then, the system continued to display faintly, "I called you here to let you obtain the treasure." HM? Lin Yuan was slightly startled. This was not what he had expected. Why did the system suddenly become so generous? The Tianwu world is about to be repaired. Now, the god of the underworld and the celestial emperor have candidates. Now, all the forces of the Tianwu continent are waiting for the world to contend for supremacy and choose a human king who can suppress the world for eternity. Although I'm not sure how long it will take for the Tianwu continent to be unified, it will be at least a few years, and at most 30 years. When the Tianwu continent is repaired and the world is upgraded, you and I have to prepare early. That is why I called you here today. I have a treasure here called the 3 Lives Stone. After the world is repaired, you can use this treasure to slash out for a time and reach the cultivation of a sage-to-be. The 3 Lives Stone? When he heard these 3 words, Lin Yuan felt as if someone had dropped a heavy bomb in his mind and detonated it. He only felt his mind go blank and even buzzing. Putting aside the mythological background, the 3 Lives Stone was just a stone that symbolized the meaning of love. There were often scholars who recited poems and essays. The 3 Lives Stone was soft and refined. After being polished, it could reveal patterns similar to wood grains or black dots. Hence, it was also known as the red sandalwood of the stone. After being polished, a large piece of stone could be formed into pictures of mountains, waterfalls, ancient trees, withered branches, birds and beasts, romantic figures, and so on. It was a strange stone that contained countless feelings of elegance and literary talent. But when it came to the mythological background, the 3 words 3 Lives Stone were enough to make countless primordial creatures panic. According to the myths and legends, when Nuwa created humans, she would take a grain of sand and use it as a counting tool for each doll she created. Over time, the sand would form a stubborn stone. This was the predecessor of the 3 Lives Stone. After Nuwa finished creating humans, she would place this stone on the spirit river of the western heavens. But this stone could be said to have existed since the beginning of the world. After being baptized by the essence of the sun and moon, it already had spirituality. It was even stained with the merit of Nuwa's creation of humans. With all these factors added together, anyone with half a brain would know that this stone was bound to become an extraordinary existence in the future. And this was indeed the case. Countless years later, this stone pierced the heavens and reached the apex of the heavens, almost breaking through the heavens. 2 more divine patterns would appear, separating the stone into 3 sections, containing the will to devour the 3 realms of heaven, earth, and man. Even Yuwa had to go through great pains to seal this stone, but only temporarily. If she left it alone after sealing it, this stone was bound to appear again. At that time, not even Yuwa would be its match. Chapter 12:18. In the end, Nuwa named the stone the 3 Lives Stone and bestowed it with the position of the deity of marriage. Afterwards, she named the 3 parts of the stone as the past life, present life, and future life. That wasn't all. Because she was worried that the 3 Lives Stone's demonic nature wouldn't be restrained, Nuwa finally placed the 3 Lives Stone beside the River of Forgetfulness in the Netherworld. Since the 3 Lives Stone suppressed the River of Forgetfulness, the River of Forgetfulness also coiled around the 3 Lives Stone. That was why the great desolate world had one less calamity. No matter how tragic and moving the love stories about the 3 Lives Stone were, and how many people went to the 3 Lives Stone to ask for marriage, as long as there was a mythological background, the 3 Lives Stone was a demonic object that could destroy the heavens and earth. Even the heavens' sages had to be wary of it. As long as it was tainted with great merit, no matter what it was in the past, it would definitely be incredible in the future. However, Lin Yuan had never imagined that the system would actually have a 3 Lives Stone, and that it would be willing to give it to him. What should he do if he panicked? Brat, you were originally the underworld deity of the heaven martial world. Unless you die prematurely, once the heaven martial world is restored, the netherworld will definitely be under your control. Otherwise, if it was anyone else holding the position of underworld deity, they wouldn't hand over the River of Forgetfulness to someone else. Now that you have control over the River of Forgetfulness, when the netherworld is born, you can turn it into the River of Forgetfulness. Then you can refine the 3 Lives Stone and use it to suppress the River of Forgetfulness to ensure the stability of the netherworld. In a certain sense, the 3 Lives Stone was a treasure that was incomparably compatible with Lin Yuan. After all, Lin Yuan only had complete control over the River of Forgetfulness. The 3 Lives Stone was originally used to suppress the River of Forgetfulness. With the 3 Lives Stone suppressing the River of Forgetfulness, in the future, Lin Yuan could even refine sages into the River of Forgetfulness. Without his permission, no existence could escape the River of Forgetfulness. However, to use the 3 Lives Stone to create a corpse, even if you want to use the merit of heaven and earth to become a sage-to-be, you have to kill 3 lives to become a saint. Don't think that you can become a saint by relying on the power of incense. Look at the goddess of golden spirit, the first female deity of the tribe of Jie, the daughter of Emperor Haoyan, who was killed so easily. She fought against the 3 great generals and their mounts in the innumerable immortals formation. It was Dipamkra, the old thief, who secretly attacked her with the sea-calming pearl and died on the list of deification. In the end, she still killed a corpse and took the position of Lady Mother of the Chariot. Her priesthood is even higher than Emperor Tianhuang and Emperor Zui. What's more, if you don't use the 3 Life Stone to create a corpse to take on the role of the god of the underworld, do you want to repeat the mistakes of Empress Pingxin in the future and keep your true body and primordial spirit in the netherworld, unable to be born? Or do you think that any primordial spiritual treasure can easily resist the erosion of the netherworld death chi? If it weren't for the fact that the world of heaven martial arts gave birth to an existence that was very likely to kill that person, and that your previous performance was too outstanding and I invested too much in you, do you think I would be willing to give you the 3 Lives Stone to create a corpse incarnation? However, you're lucky. At least you don't have to worry about the primordial spiritual treasure before you reach the peak of sage-to-be. Use the 3 Lives Stone to create an evil corpse and find a way to cultivate the green leaf lotus. With the resources you have now, when the green leaf lotus matures, you can take out the lotus seeds and create a good corpse incarnation. If you're lucky, you can even get a primordial lotus seed as a magic weapon. I dare not say that it's comparable to the 12th grade lotus seeds in Untainted Land, but it may have the power of an 8th grade lotus seed. As for whether you can create a self-corpse and officially become a saint of the Great Path, it depends on your own luck. I can't interfere. The system slowly displayed and urged Lin Yuan to get the treasure quickly. Lin Yuan didn't know why, but he felt that the system seemed to be very urgent at the moment. However, when it came to the green leaf lotus, Lin Yuan couldn't help but think of the time when he had just arrived in this world and had a bad mouth with the system. After all, at that time, the green leaf lotus, a Saint-grade rare flower, had taken root in its nest and was absolutely a complete nuisance. However, Lin Yuan's growth speed now far exceeded the system's imagination. The Saint-grade rare flower that took 1,000 years to germinate, bloom, and mature could no longer provide any practical help to Lin Yuan, because Lin Yuan was now an immortal. A Saint-grade rare flower is just a Sith. Lin Yuan curled his lips and said somewhat helplessly, "If I do as you say, how much divine power will I have to spend to refine this flower to the level of a primordial spiritual treasure?" How much divine power will you have to spend? You won't need to spend any divine power at all. Killing people is enough. Quite a number of immortals have come to the heavenly court, and there is no lack of famous ones on the investiture of the gods. If you kill them all, then pile their corpses under the green leaf lotus and use the divine power in their bodies to nourish the green leaf lotus, this flower will definitely evolve in less than 100 years. Lin Yuan was silent for a moment. He and the heavenly court were on opposite sides at the moment. Killing the immortals of the heavenly court didn't have any psychological burden for Lin Yuan, but after all, they were enemies because of their different standpoints. In fact, there was no blood feud between them, and they hadn't even seen each other much. Lin Yuan could kill them without any psychological burden, but he couldn't bring himself to use their corpses as fertilizer for his own flower after killing them. This mentality wasn't contradictory. It was just as Lin Yuan said. Although he was no saint, he still felt that some people deserved to be saved, and some deserved to die. He also knew that he wasn't a good person, but there was always a clear bottom line in his heart that he had never crossed. The system's words were undoubtedly asking Lin Yuan to challenge the bottom line in his heart. While he was still hesitating, he suddenly heard a commotion coming from outside. Walking out of the octagonal tower, Lin Yuan saw an old acquaintance. One of the quarreling parties was surprisingly Yin Hong, but there were some differences compared to when Lin Yuan had seen him before. This was because Yin Hong wasn't wearing a suit of armor, but a black emperor's robe. Obviously, most of the consciousness bodies were like this. Just like how Lin Yuan missed those peaceful days, the manifestation of the consciousness body was the most complacent time in his previous life. Yin Hong was wearing an emperor's robe, obviously wanting to ascend the throne of Yin Shang as the human king. In a place like this, the consciousness couldn't lie. Although Lin Yuan hadn't seen the other person who was quarreling with Yin Hong before, he had an inexplicable feeling of disgust. That person had a handsome appearance and was more than 8 feet tall. He wore a white emperor's robe, and his left hand held a large seal. His sharp eyebrows and starry eyes contained endless anger. He coldly sized up Yin Hong and said in a cold voice, "Yin Hong, I've tolerated you time and time again, but you just have to go against me. Why, do you think I'm really a clay figurine that doesn't even have a little bit of anger?" Chapter 12:19. Yin Hong sneered, put his hands behind his back, and said in a cold voice, "Bo Yi Cow, first come, first served is indeed important when buying things, but there is also a saying that the highest bidder gets it. Well, I can afford it, but you can't, so you say I'm aggressive? You people from the Ji family of Shichi are all shameless." Bo Yi Cow's face changed. Seeing more and more people watching around, he was even angrier. It was good that the highest bidder got it, and first come, first served was also good. The problem was that the spiritual object he bought was used to refine the power of stars. What did it have to do with the god of 5 grains? Even if he bought it, Yin Hong would never use it. He had just walked to the front desk and hadn't had time to pay the bill, but Yin Hong directly said that he would pay 10 times the price. It would be strange if he didn't target him. Who would directly bid without even looking at the goods before buying? Even the stupid son of the landlord didn't dare to play like this. There were many people watching the show, but most of them didn't mean to interrupt. Only a few people whispered. Yin Hong and Ji Cao have a big quarrel every time they meet. What's the point of quarreling? In my opinion, let's disperse. These two guys don't go to the arena. It's really boring. Lin Yuan's eyes flashed slightly, and his eyes fell on the handsome young man's face. He sneered. Is this the handsome eldest son of the Ji family who even the demon concubine Daji couldn't help seducing? In my opinion, you're just an ordinary person. If Daji really likes you, then I can only say that you don't want to donate your eyes to someone who needs it, okay? Ha. As soon as he said that, someone couldn't help laughing. Many people also looked at Lin Yuan curiously. After all, it was not the first time that Yin Hong and Bo Yikao had this kind of conflict. And every time, it was Yin Hong who made the adjustment, and Bo Yikao just scolded him to vent his anger. In the end, they parted on bad terms. They had never really fought. But this time, it seemed to be a little different. Yin Hong came to make trouble for Bo Yikao this time, and he brought a helper? When Lin Yuan's voice fell, Bo Yikao's face darkened, and he said coldly, "How dare you? How can a monarch be slandered by such a lowly person?" Bo Yikao's appearance was indeed not bad. In terms of handsomeness, he absolutely crushed those little fresh meat that Lin Yuan had seen in his previous life. Moreover, there was a strong scholarly aura between his brows. If he did not speak, he could be considered as someone with a scholarly aura. Moreover, although Bo Yikao's facial features were handsome, at the same time, he was tall. Not only did he not have any feminine aura, but he perfectly balanced the two auras of gentleness and masculinity. Even though there were not many cultivators who were ugly, Bo Yikao's appearance was definitely in the top 10 of the people that Lin Yuan had seen. But for some reason, Lin Yuan just hated Bo Yikao. Even though it was the first time the two had met, the disgust that came from the bottom of their hearts made Lin Yuan unable to hold back his ridicule. "Emperor? You are Emperor Ji Heir." Lin Yuan tilted his head. The cold aura that he had honed in the sky martial world for 3 years was completely released. He said coldly, "After the 3 sovereigns ruled the world and the 5 emperors settled the world, all human kings were called emperors. Even DXN, who was tarnished as an eternal tyrant, was the same. On the other hand, your Ji family's Zhou dynasty, after 800 years, even if you were a pig, you should have become the king of pigs, right? Good fellow, after 800 years, the Zhou dynasty became weaker and weaker. Since GFA began to call himself king, Ji Chang, who was conferred the title of king, was also only king. The subsequent rulers came one after another, and the territory became smaller and smaller, causing more and more vassals in the world, causing chaos in the spring and autumn warring states period, causing countless deaths and injuries. The face and dignity of the human king has been completely thrown away by your Zhou dynasty." Speaking till here, Lin Yuan's lips curled up slightly, and he laughed sinisterly. "And what are you? Ji Chang died and was conferred the title of king. You are not even a fart. Being listed as the North Pole Emperor in the investiture of the gods, you are considered an emperor? Brat, how can a sparrow or swallow know the ambition of a swan? You don't understand how powerful the great Zhou dynasty is at all. Have you ever seen any dynasty after the Zhou dynasty that lasted for 800 years? Bo Yikao pointed at Lin Yuan with a red face and scolded, "Besides, since you know that I am the Middle Heaven North Pole Emperor of Ziwei, who are you? You don't even dare to introduce yourself, and you dare to insult the emperor?" Ha! Lin Yuan laughed and turned his gaze to Yin Hong's face. He said in a low voice, "Yin Hong, Ji Cao doesn't know me. What about you?" Yin Hong stared at Lin Yuan, his sword-like eyebrows tightly knitted together, as if he was thinking about something. After a while, Yin Hong's expression suddenly changed. He took a few steps back and said involuntarily, "You? Why are you here?" The smile on Lin Yuan's face grew wider, but he didn't answer. Instead, his gaze fell on Bo Yikao's face. Bo Yikao was silent for a while. His expression was also a little ugly. Although the North Pole Emperor's position was honorable, he was only a major celestial official and didn't have a lot of faith among the people. Most of the time, when people talked about the North Pole Star, it was basically a dynasty that was about to fall and there were endless rebellions everywhere. In order to justify themselves, the rebels would say that they were the North Pole star that had descended to the world and that they were the destined lord. The North Pole star had descended to the world. Most of the time, it was a rebellion? Did the North Pole Emperor not care about his reputation? But to be honest, the North Pole Emperor's position was not as powerful as that of the 5 grains star Yin Hong or the Taisui Yin Jiao. If he met them outside the untainted world, most of the time, it was the brothers of the Yin family who would wantonly humiliate him, the North Pole Emperor, while he could only scold them. After all, they were not on the same level at all. Even if they were comparing backers, they had the support of the immortals of the Chan sect. In the early years, he, the North Pole Emperor, could still rely on the Emperor of Zhou, Jifit. Later, when GFA and the Zhou dynasty were gone, he almost lost his lineage. Hey, Yin Hong's helper seems to have a powerful background. Of course. Didn't you see that he came from the Heaven No. 1 shop? Is that a place where ordinary people can afford to shop? You're right. I just don't know who this person is. Even the immortals of the top greater world like the untainted world are afraid of him. Discussions once again broke out in the surroundings. These onlookers were indeed very curious about Lin Yuan's identity. After all, the untainted land was a top big thousand world. Yin Hong and Bo Yikao were both immortals in it. Their status in the heavens and realms was actually not low. However, in the face of an unknown person, Yin Hong behaved so reverently. However, Bo Yikao clearly did not know this person. Therefore, this person either came from a world that didn't belong to the untainted world, or Yin Hong colluded with others to put on a show to humiliate Bo Yikao. Chapter 12:20. All of a sudden, many people's gazes became meaningful. There was no lack of transmigrators, reincarnators, and people with great providence who could enter this space. Behind each of them stood the heavenly Tao or similar existences. It could be said that any one of these people, if placed in their own world, would definitely stand at the top of the pyramid, even if they could not suppress eternity. However, the reason in this world had always been very simple. No one would pay a price for no reason. Just like how the system cultivated each host to deal with Hongjun, the purpose of these people with great luck was to invade other worlds or guard against the invasion of other worlds. Speaking of the untainted world, in all the worlds in the universe, any world that had a connection with the outside world knew that the untainted world was an extremely terrifying world. In other worlds, those losers who had left their names behind in the prehistorical world could be counted as peerless powerful beings who could suppress all enemies. Therefore, the untainted world had always been called the Great Wide World of the Great Wide World. Bo Yikao and Yin Hong were both existences in the untainted world. In this trading market, as long as they did not go too far, generally, no one was willing to interfere with them. In other words, no one was willing to offend the untainted world for such a trivial matter. But today, a young man of unknown origin made Yin Hong show fear, and he even took the initiative to provoke Bo Yikao. It was clear that he did not intend to leave any face for the untainted world. Even those who were not interested in what had happened here could not help but cast curious looks. This was not a trivial matter. After all, in the eyes of these experts from other worlds, Lin Yuan's current behavior was like slapping the face of the untainted world. In the current situation, there were only 2 possibilities. First, the provocateur was a fool who did not know how powerful the untainted world was, so the ignorant were fearless. Second, the provocateur's background was not small. Even in the face of the untainted world, he was not afraid at all. Judging from Yin Hong's reaction, the facts should be inclined to the second possibility. But speaking of which, if there really was an existence that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the untainted world, it was definitely not good news for them. It had been said before that there could not be kindness in all the worlds. Even if both sides had no ill intentions, they still had to be on guard against each other. Over time, neither side found the other pleasing to the eye. Over the years, the untainted world had been like a malignant tumor. It had crushed nearly 100 sectors and even forced many sectors to form an alliance with the help of some existences that had escaped from the untainted world. Only by gathering the power of hundreds of sectors could they barely suppress the untainted world's attack. At this time, if another world that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the primordial world appeared, that would be fun. The balance that had been maintained with great difficulty would be broken in an instant. If the two sides were to fight, the surrounding greater worlds might be destroyed by the aftermath of the battle, not to mention the lesser worlds and medium worlds nearby. More and more people gathered around. Lin Yuan still had a playful expression on his face. After a moment of silence, Bo Yikao slowly raised his head. His handsome features were somewhat distorted, and he said in a deep voice, "Your Excellency, I don't know where you come from, but you and I have no enmity against each other. We can even say that we have never met before. But you bullied me with Yin Hong without any reason. Isn't this a bit too much? Or do you really think that there is no one in the untainted world?" As soon as Bo Yikao finished speaking, several people's expressions changed slightly. They pushed the crowd aside and moved closer. These people were all existences from the untainted world. Not all of them were immortals, but the weakest one was an individual immortal. Previously, when Yin Hong and Bo Yikao had a conflict, they had taken it as a joke. After all, Yin Shang had been destroyed by the Zhou dynasty. The two princes of Yin Shang and Ji Chang's eldest son had been sent to the investiture of the gods. Even in the heavenly court, they could meet from time to time if they wanted to. Therefore, they were not surprised that the two princes of Yin Shang had made trouble for Bo Yikao. But today, this matter had changed. To put it simply, no matter how much trouble Yin Hong and Bo Yikao made, it was an internal matter of the untainted world. However, Lin Yuan was obviously not an existence from the untainted world. Now that he stood out, he almost pointed at Bo Yikao's nose and scolded him. If he could not get an explanation for today's matter, wouldn't the untainted world lose face here? Lin Yuan crossed his arms in front of his chest. His eyes swept over those people who were approaching him, and he said indifferently, "Am I wrong? Do you deserve to be called an emperor? If you are really angry and have been humiliated by me to this extent, what you should do is to fight with me and not ask me loudly if I think that there is no one in the untainted world. To put it nicely, you are just pretending to be fierce. To put it bluntly, you are a piece of trash." Yin Hong, who was standing aside, narrowed his eyes slightly. He glanced at Lin Yuan and then at Bo Yikao. His expression was uncertain, as if he was thinking about something. He really did not understand the current situation. Logically speaking, although the Black Jiao had some connections with the untainted world, he was only in existence after the ancient times. The demons, ghosts, immortals and Buddhas of that era had already fallen into silence. After all, that period of time was the end of the Dharma of heaven and earth. Even the immortal sages could not interfere with the human world at will. They could only open up their own heavenly abodes and hide in them, waiting for the end of the Dharma of heaven and earth to pass. It was also during that period of time that two existences, who were called taboos in the untainted world, joined hands and cut off the untainted world from that period of time and space. As a result, the world that was originally created by the primordial chaos was fragmented. Fragments could be seen everywhere in the sea of bitterness. Although the untainted world was more vast now, almost 90% of the land was plundered from other worlds. Whether the Black Jiao came from the ancient times or the ancient times before it was cut off, there was no difference. It was impossible for existences in that era to come into contact with immortals and gods. This should be the first time that the Black Jiao and Bo Yikao met. But why would the Black Jiao show hatred towards Bo Yikao? Yin Hong was very clear about the Black Jiao's attitude towards Bo Yikao at this moment. Because for countless years he and Yin Jiao had the same attitude towards Bo Yikao. He could not see through him. He really could not see through him. This black flood dragon couldn't be crazy, right? Yin Hong looked thoughtful. Although he did not hit Bo Yikao when he was down, there were so many onlookers around. After all, Bo Yikao was also a person who cared about his reputation. At this moment, his face became redder and redder, and a fierce light gradually appeared in his eyes. Chapter 12:21. The sharpness in Bo Ikao's eyes was not obvious, but many people still noticed it. It was interesting to think about it. Bo Ikao was the North Pole Emperor. He commanded all the stars in the sky and controlled ghosts and lightning. He was definitely not an ordinary person. According to the ranks of the gods, even the 4 North Pole sages, including Tian Peng, Tianyu, Yixing, and Zhenwu, had to serve the emperor. The North Pole Emperor of the Middle Heaven North Pole Emperor controlled the heavens and the earth. He commanded all the stars in the sky and controlled ghosts and lightning. He ruled all the stars, controlled all the laws and ruled Fengdu. He was the master of all the stars. In the entire heavenly court, the North Pole Emperor was only below the Sky Emperor in terms of status and power. But facts proved that one's power depended on the person. One could not be invincible just because he was conferred a high position. Anyone who knew a little about the untainted world knew that Bo Ikao, the North Pole Emperor, was a joke. Not to mention the 4 North Pole sages, even the star officials did not give Bo Ikao face. Star officials at the level of the 6 divisions of the Southern Dipper, the 5 stars, the 4 luminaries, and the 7 elements of the Big Dipper even dared to ignore Bo Ikao and never participate in the meetings he held. But Bo Ikao was right about one thing. Emperors could not be humiliated. Bo Ikao did not know Lin Yuan and had never interacted with Lin Yuan before. But now he was forced to this point in public. If he still swallowed his pride like he did with Yin Hong and Yin Jiao, his name would not be on the investiture of the gods when he returned to the untainted world. Although the North Pole Emperor star was sullen, he was still one of the great gods of the heavenly court. He was immortal. If there was a choice, who would be willing to never reincarnate and have their soul destroyed? Okay, let's fight in the arena. Bo Ikao's handsome face became more and more twisted. He flung his snow-white sleeves and walked towards the arena with a cold snort. Lin Yuan followed Bo Ikao expressionlessly, his arms still crossed in front of his chest. In fact, at this point, Lin Yuan himself also felt that something was wrong. It was clearly the first time he had met Bo Ikao, so why did he have such a strong sense of disgust? Even when he saw Bo Ikao's face, he could not help but feel a sense of hatred from the depths of his heart. Could it be that this brat's face was poisonous? Anyway, according to Feng Shen, Bo Ikao's life was not smooth sailing. He was the eldest son of Ji Chang. After Ji Chang passed away, he would be able to smoothly sit on the top seat of Shiqi and become one of the vassals. However, he was born at the wrong time. He met Dxin, who resisted the theocracy, broke the hierarchy, and wantonly promoted talents but did not have a high background. Coupled with the manipulation of the chess enthusiasts, the entire Yinshang was directly involved in the calamity. Good Lord, the first successor of Shiqi, not to mention Shiqi, even Zhaoge was chopped into meat paste by Dxin before she could walk out. She was even made into meat soup and fed to Ji Chang. After his death, a bit of his true spirit was listed on the list of deification. Although he won the priesthood of Ziwei the Great, his virtue was not worthy of the priesthood. He did not have many incense offerings. When the Zhou dynasty was destroyed, his incense offerings were almost cut off. The 4 holy immortals and other celestial officials under him were more famous than him. Lin Yuan, who had not experienced that era, did not know the specific content of these stories. But now, he just came to the trading market to buy something. Good Lord, he first ran into Yin Hong and was directly crushed by his wealth. He was angry and argued with him, but then he ran into Lin Yuan. And Lin Yuan inexplicably had a feeling of disgust for him. This guy was qualified to be the Ziwei Emperor star, but he was absolutely suitable to be a jinx. Soon, Bo Ikao and Lin Yuan came to the periphery of the arena one after another. The arena in the center of the trading market was not a place to fight. Before the two sides went to the arena, they had to make a notarization first. After finding the person in charge of the arena to make an appointment, they each had to take out a prize of equal value as collateral before they could go to the arena. In addition to paying the corresponding divine power of the arena manager and the arena manager, the prize, taken out by the two sides, belonged to the winner. However, it was easy to make an appointment for the arena. Almost 8 out of the 10 arenas were empty. After all, everyone came to the trading market to exchange for various kinds of spiritual objects needed for cultivation. No one would come to this martial arts competition. Even if they won, so what? They just destroyed the opponent's consciousness. Even without the nourishment of spiritual objects, it would recover in 3 to 5 days. Bo Yikao snorted. Looking at Lin Yuan, who was calm, he said in a cold voice, "Boy, don't say that I bullied you. I'll let you take the collateral first, lest I take out a good treasure. You can't even get a fraction of my treasure even if you sell everything you have." Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly. After thinking for a moment, Lin Yuan swung his right hand and threw out a gray stone. "I thought you had some good treasure. It turns out that it's just a broken stone. Boy, if you don't dare to fight with me, then forget it. How about you kneel down and kowtow to me 3,000 times, then I'll let this matter go. How about it?" Glancing at the stone that Lin Yuan threw out, Bo Yikao's face suddenly had a touch of ridicule. The arena did not have any requirements for the prize. If one didn't find it shameful, one could just grab a handful of sand from the roadside. However, if one side took out a treasure, the other side had to take out a prize of equal value as collateral. There was no loophole to take advantage of. Seeing that Lin Yuan was indifferent, Bo Yikao's face darkened slightly. He didn't continue to speak. With a casual wave of his right hand, a crystal-clear stone appeared out of nowhere. It looked like only a thin layer of shell was left, and the things inside had been extracted. One could vaguely feel that this stone contained a strange power. Casually throwing the stone in his hand onto the arena, Bo Yikao sneered and said, "I don't have a hobby of picking up trash. This is a star stone produced by the Z-Way Star Palace. Although I have extracted nearly 80% of its star power, in the mortal world, it can barely be regarded as a treasure. Anyway, it's all trash. I won't argue with you so much. Get on the arena." As soon as he finished speaking, Lin Yuan still stood in the same place. His body was as straight as a javelin, but the ridicule in his eyes became more and more intense, as if it was going to turn into a terrifying substance. At this moment, the star stone that Bo Yikao threw onto the arena was crushed by a force and instantly turned into powder. It was blown away by the wind, and after a moment, no trace of it could be seen. What kind of magic did you use? It's just a broken stone. How can there be such a difference?" Bo Yikao's slender sword-like eyebrows were slightly raised, as if he still couldn't believe what he had seen. Chapter 12:22. It was said that the arena manager was a relic left behind by the mighty figure who had created this space, and it had been acting like a puppet for many years. It was hard to say whether it had any intelligence or not, but this space had been created countless years ago. Almost every year, there would be reckless people trying to exploit the loopholes in the arena. Without exception, all of them would be killed by the arena manager without even leaving behind a complete corpse. However, it was precisely because of these suicidal people that some of the rules of the arena had been clearly written out. When both sides received a prize, the value had to be equal. If they couldn't reach the standard value, they had to do their best to get closer to the correct value. Only then would they have a chance to raise the stakes when the arena manager inspected them. But for someone to be crushed like this meant that there was an enormous gap between the prizes of the two sides. It was like the difference between heaven and earth. They didn't even have a chance to raise the stakes before they were crushed. That stone, what on earth was that? Bo Yikao's eyes widened in disbelief as he stared at the murky stone. Does the mighty Emperor Z-Way have such poor eyesight? Lin Yuan exhaled lightly with a smile. Have you seen the Stone of 3 Lives before? As soon as he finished speaking, all the existences that came from the Great Desolate World or had some sort of relationship with the Great Desolate World gasped. Only then did they stare at the 3 Lives stone with deep shock on their faces. The Stone of 3 Lives wasn't some kind of stone meant for marriage. This demon master had once dominated the primordial chaos and was about to engulf the entire 3 realms. And now, the Stone of 3 Lives had been placed on the arena. Didn't that mean that Bo Yikao was going to take out that item? Gasp! Immediately, someone sucked in a breath of cold air. This guy had come with ill intentions. This guy was here to challenge Bo Yikao. Lin Yuan stared at Bo Yikao with a hint of a smile on his face. I've already laid down my Dao. If Emperor Ziwei doesn't dare to accept it, then just pretend I didn't say anything. I don't plan on humiliating you any further. All you have to do is avoid me when you see me in the future. Bo Yikao harumphed coldly. A hint of wariness flashed through his eyes as he swept his gaze over the stone of 3 lives. After all, this was Emperor Ziwei. So what if he was only a figurehead? In any case, his authority was still there. Bo Yikao really did have a treasure that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the 3 lives stone, or rather, with the 3 lives stone that had been sealed by Mother Nuwa. However, at this moment, he couldn't decide whether or not he should use it as a prize to participate in this duel. The 3 lives stone was indeed very tempting, but if that treasure was lost, even if he sold himself, he wouldn't be able to afford it. So that's all there is to the Emperor's star. He casually took out a 3 lives stone as a wager. Is the Emperor really that poor? Suddenly, a lazy voice sounded from outside the crowd. Lin Yuan turned his head and glanced over. It was another old acquaintance. Previously, he had used the system to summon a helper for the host. In 3 minutes, he had practically killed all the top cultivators and demon beasts of the Tianwu world. The other party had even left him a strange insect codenamed Tao. However, even now, Lin Yuan still didn't know what the other party's name was. He could only refer to him as White Coat. Following the ruckus caused by White Coat, the spectators all began to jeer. After all, the conflict between Bo Yikao and the Yin brothers wasn't just a matter of a day or two. However, every time, it was just a verbal dispute. How could it be like this time, when they were actually going to fight on the stage? At this time, how could they let Bo Yikao off the stage so easily? Impudent. Hearing the clamor, Bo Yikao's face turned red. He growled, when did this emperor say that he wasn't going to fight? This emperor just has too many treasures in his collection and hasn't thought of what to use as a wager yet. You can't really think that this emperor is that poor, right? At the same time, Bo Yikao waved his right hand and a golden light flew out. When it landed in front of the stage manager, it had already turned into a very old ancient book. On it were written the words, Dongxian Spirit Treasure True Spirit Position Diagram. This book wasn't something that could be found on the streets. Although it wasn't something that could only be found in the world, and it wasn't some supreme cultivation technique, anyone who knew about this book couldn't help but be greedy when they had the chance to obtain it. Because this book had another name, Enhanced Investiture of the Gods. During the Investiture of the Gods, Jiang Zia used the Investiture of the Gods to defeat Zhou. After the Investiture of the Gods, more than 300 righteous gods were conferred. Accurately speaking, it wasn't 300 righteous gods because a large portion of them were celestial officials. Although they were practically independent, they were still employees in name and didn't sit in the position of a big shot who gave orders. Of course, not all big shots were like Bo Yikao, who occupied such an important position as the Ziwei Emperor, but couldn't even do anything to the celestial officials under his command. However, compared to the Investiture of the Gods, the map of true spirit position diagram was much more powerful. After all, the Investiture of the Gods was just a novel in the age of Dharma's end, which was a mixture of many legends and legends. However, the map of true spirit position diagram, even in the age of Dharma's end, was recognized by Taoism. Even Patriarch Sanqing of Taoism was on the map of true spirit position diagram. What was more terrifying was that the number of immortals on the map of true spirit position diagram was 1 digit more than the Investiture of the Gods. There were as many as thousands of immortals on the map of true spirit position diagram. There were even real cultivators on the map of true spirit position diagram that appeared on the map of true spirit position diagram, such as Dragon Tiger Mountain and Maoshan Mountain. Even Gigu, Zi, Zhang Liang and others were lucky enough to be on the map of true spirit position diagram. In the map of true spirit position diagram, immortals were divided into 7 classes, from Patriarch Sanqing to human kings and saints, and below them were emperors and generals. It almost included most of the existences in the history of the three realms. There was a saying in the untainted world that after getting the map of true spirit position diagram, as long as the time was right, one could set off another investiture god tribulation at any time to establish the heavenly court. When the tribulation was over, whoever got the map of true spirit position diagram would be the real master of the heavenly court. This was much better than the awkward situation when Haoyan was just established in the heavenly court. This thing was also in Lin Yuan's plan. It was the kind of treasure that he didn't need to look for if he didn't have the chance, but he would definitely get it if he had the chance. Originally, he just wanted to give it a try. After all, as the Ziwei Emperor, it was actually very suitable for him to be in charge of the map of true spirit position diagram. However, considering Bo Yicao's image as a good-for-nothing, Lin Yuan actually didn't have much hope. At most, it would be a hopeless situation. Unexpectedly, Bo Yicao really threw out a map of true spirit position diagram. Lin Yuan's eyes suddenly lit up, as if thousands of stars were blooming in his eyes. Chapter 12:23. Standing in the arena, Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and stared at Bo Yicao at the other end of the arena. Bo Yicao was not so polite. Almost as soon as he stepped into the arena, he flicked his sleeves and instantly released thousands of rays of light. These rays of light were gradually distorted and deformed in the process of flying, as if they were crushed by an invisible force. Humph! Failing to hit him, Bo Yicao snorted coldly and flicked his sleeves again. A golden bridge formed by golden light went straight to Lin Yuan, and the sound of glass breaking could be faintly heard. Lin Yuan did not choose to take it head-on. Instead, he turned sideways to avoid the golden bridge that was attacking him. He opened his mouth and spat out a ray of colorful light, which also shot toward Bo Yicao. No one knew what kind of existence created this space, but all kinds of treasures could be traded here. As long as the deal was finalized, someone would naturally take away the items traded by the two sides and exchange them. However, the ones who really came to this space were all bodies of consciousness. Bodies of consciousness could also fight with other bodies of consciousness, but this kind of battle was different from the fight of physical body and the fight of flesh and blood. It was a different kind of battle. In short, it was fantasy. With enough understanding of each great way, one could imagine powerful moves in an instant and perfect them, and then make them appear to fight against the enemy. The more familiar one was with the original, the more powerful the manifestation would be. In theory, if Lin Yuan was familiar with the manufacturing methods of various military weapons, he would have no problem throwing out tens of thousands of mushroom bombs in an instant. Unfortunately, Lin Yuan knew nothing about mushroom bombs. He even knew how to use most of the military weapons but did not know how to make them. Insignificant skill. Bo Yicao looked coldly at the colorful light that was getting closer and closer to him. Although he did not take it head-on, he had already smelled a sweet and fishy smell. Obviously, this thing was poisonous and could not be taken head-on. Otherwise, it would be easy to suffer a loss and lose the rhythm of the battle. With a thought, 9 bronze cauldrons suddenly appeared above Bo Yicao's head. The 9 cauldrons were all made of bronze, carved and smelted with famous mountains, rivers, lakes, and seas. If one's eyesight was good enough, one could even see the unique strange things in those mountains and rivers. These were the 9 cauldrons of China. The moment the 9 cauldrons appeared, Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed into slits, revealing a look of dread. Rumor has it that the 9 cauldrons were created during the early years of the Xia dynasty. Du divided the 9 provinces and gathered all the copper in the country to create the 9 cauldrons. This meant that the 9 provinces were under the jurisdiction of the human king. It could be said that before Qin Shi Huang used the jade annulus of He clan to carve the imperial jade seal, the symbol of the human king's authority was the 9 cauldrons. The 9 cauldrons were even considered the most precious treasures in the Xia, Shang, and Zhou dynasties. Unfortunately, the prodigal Zhou Xianwang had lost it. It was said that it had sunk into the Sisui River. But strictly speaking, Zhou Xianwang and Bo Yicao belonged to the same category. They were both unlucky types. In the 800 years of the Zhou dynasty, every emperor of Zhou would confer titles to vassals and kings, and the vast territory became smaller and smaller. Some powerful vassal states even began to surpass the Zhou dynasty. Therefore, every emperor of Zhou did not have an easy time, especially Zhou Xianwang, because the era he lived in was the peak of the reform of the vassal states. Famous officials and generals emerged one after another, such as Tianji, Zhou Ji, Pang Wan, Sun Bin, Shang Yang, Shen Buhai, and so on. These powerful people who left a deep mark in history all became famous during Zhou Xianwang's reign. It could be imagined how difficult Zhou Xianwang's days were. However, although the 9 cauldrons were lost during Zhou Xianwang's reign, it was undeniable that the 9 cauldrons were the symbol of the human king's authority. At the same time, they were the most precious treasures of humanity that had suppressed the fate of the Xia, Shang, and Zhou dynasties. Although they could not be compared with the 10 heavens primordial spirit treasure, their power was definitely above the Tao Te Ching and other precious treasures of virtue. Of course, some said that after the fall of the Zhou dynasty, the 9 cauldrons disappeared into the Sisui River. Others said that after the fall of the Zhou dynasty, the world was in chaos. In order to prevent the 9 cauldrons from being lost or falling into the hands of evil people, the 3 emperors in the Fire Cloud Cave used their great magic to take the 9 cauldrons away to suppress the fate of the human tribe. The 9 cauldrons appear and suppress the heavens. Suppress them. Bo Yikao stretched out his hand and pointed at Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan immediately felt a strong force falling from the unseen world. He could not resist the suppressing force at all. Almost in an instant, Lin Yuan was forced to half kneel on the ground. His face was red, and his body made of consciousness even faded a lot, as if it would collapse at any time. After the successful attack, Bo Yikao almost could not suppress the complacency on his face. He said with a gloomy face, "Humph, a mere ant dares to talk about being the emperor. Today, I will kill one of your consciousnesses. If we meet again in the future, I will definitely destroy your soul and your body and spirit." Half kneeling on the ground, Lin Yuan let out a long breath of turbid air. He frowned slightly. Here it comes again. That hatred that came out of nowhere once again took over his heart. It seemed that after Bo Yikao condensed the 9 cauldrons, this hatred became more and more intense. It was so intense that Lin Yuan could vaguely distinguish that there were other emotions hidden in this hatred, anger at his incompetence. Roar. A roar like that of a wild beast came from his throat. A strong force of unknown origin burst out. Under the support of this force, Lin Yuan stood up from the ground uncontrollably. He stared coldly at Bo Yikao, and the anger in his chest almost swallowed up his last bit of reason. This is impossible." Bo Yikao's face changed slightly, and he said involuntarily, "I have studied the 9 cauldrons for hundreds of years, and only then did I see the simulation of a wisp of gist of trueness. The 9 cauldrons, which condensed the fate of 3 dynasties, are the supreme national weapons. It can be said that once the 9 cauldrons appear, the world will be stabilized. You are not a sage. How can you resist the suppressing force of the 9 cauldrons?" "Sage?" A low and hoarse voice came out of Lin Yuan's mouth, and immediately his tone rose. "When the human race goes against the heavens and fights for the heavenly mandate, even if the front is beyond redemption, we should still move forward and usurp the heavens to change our fate. The 9 cauldrons are the important weapons of the human tribe. Under the suppression of the fate of the human tribe, even if the opponent is a sage, so what? Seeing the supreme treasure of the human tribe, even a sage has to kneel before me." "You are..." Hearing this, Bo Yikao's face suddenly changed. But Yin Hong, who was watching the battle from the side, turned pale instantly. He also stared at Lin Yuan, who was standing straight like a javelin on the arena without blinking. He inexplicably felt that the tip of his nose was a little sore, and his vision gradually blurred. That voice did not belong to Lin Yuan. He was the king of a generation in the ancient times. Angry Immortal demanded too much and roared, "If the sage does not die, the robbers will not stop." He fought until the divine power was almost destroyed in the Shang dynasty. With the body of a mortal, he suppressed all the gods and Buddhas in the sky. The last king of the Shang dynasty, Dxin. Chapter 12:24. I'll only use one punch. You can comprehend as much as you can. There's prosperity and decline in the world. I don't care if the Shang dynasty is destroyed or if the gods and Buddhas are rampant. I only hope that everyone in this world has the heart of a king. I hope that the prosperity of the human race will never disappear. I hope that the human race will stand tall in this world. Under the control of the mighty force, Lin Yuan slowly raised his right hand. In an instant, endless power gathered at the tip of his fist. Lin Yuan seemed to hear countless voices in the unseen world. Some were cursing, some were thanking, and some were praying. It was as if a picture scroll had appeared before his eyes. It was a battle against the heavens, the gods, and the people. He kept promoting the talents at the bottom of the hierarchy, suppressing the officials and the gods so that they could not raise their heads. He gave all the talented people a stage to display their talents. He found a better habitat for his people, hunted beasts, built houses, and developed the barren mountains and forests into prosperous cities. Dxion's life was quickly displayed before Lin Yuan's eyes. In the end, the fast-forwarded image stopped at the day when the Shang dynasty's army set out to the south. Lin Yuan, who had some understanding of this period of history, knew that this was the most important battle in Dxion's life. It was also the last battle he fought for his people as the king of Huaxia. At that time, the Shang dynasty was in the Little Ice Age. The so-called Little Ice Age referred to the drastic drop in global temperature, which led to the reduction of food production, migration of wild beasts, floods, droughts, hailstorms, locusts, earthquakes, windstorms, frost, and plagues. In the face of such disasters, everyone would die if they did not migrate to a warmer place. Therefore, after Dxin went through a series of struggles to suppress the gods and the officials, all the feudal lords were scared witless. All of them longed for another person to sit on the throne. At the critical juncture, Dxin resolutely chose to lead the army to the south just to fulfill his duty as the king of Huaxia. He wanted to find a place for his people to settle down. This battle could be said to be the peak of the military. According to some historical records, Dxion's expedition to the south had expanded the Shang dynasty's territory by at least 5 times. And then, King Shang was stuffed to death. The fall of the Shang dynasty was actually similar to the fall of the Qin dynasty. Qin Shi Huang conquered the eastern barbarians, the southern barbarians, the western barbarians, and the northern barbarians. He left all the troops of the state of Qin on the battlefield to suppress the foreign tribes. Until the reign of Emperor Wu of Han, there were still troops wearing the armor of the state of Qin in Lingnan. Almost all of them were the descendants of the soldiers who suppressed the barbarians during the Qin dynasty. Other places were also suppressed by the troops of the state of Qin. Before the death of Qin Shi Huang, he even took the initiative to order these troops not to return no matter what happened in the country. If the state of Qin perished, they were allowed to be kings on the spot. As a result, after Hu Hai ascended to the throne, rebel armies rose up all over the country. Just as they were about to reach Xianyang City, Zhang Han had no choice but to form an army with his concubines and prisoners to fight them off. The destruction of Yinshang was also due to this. King Shang had expanded his territory by more than 5 times. Although he had made great military achievements, the problem he was facing now was even more severe. After all, there were countless vassals in the country who wanted to pull him down from the throne, and there were more new territories abroad waiting to be developed. Under such circumstances, King Shang's decision was to leave the elite troops in the newly conquered territories to suppress the rebels, while he only brought some injured soldiers back to Zhaoge, escorting some of the slaves he had plundered through the war. Even so, King Shang had defeated the allied vassals time and time again through his tactics and military strategy. Lin Yuan saw that the allied vassals were burdened by the slaves abandoned by King Shang. Their already stretched rations were almost depleted, and they were faced with Zhaoge, which was built like a war fortress by the successive kings of Yinshang. Not to mention that Lin Yuan had been through many wars, Even a newbie who had never eaten pork would know that the allied vassals would fail due to the lack of rations if there were no accidents. King Shang lost. The ministers he trusted were traitors, his uncles were traitors, his brothers were traitors, his empress, and his children were all traitors. Therefore, with an absolute advantage, the gates of Zhaoge were opened by a bunch of traitors. The allied vassals, who were starving, swarmed in. They burned, killed, and plundered all the way to the palace. The scene froze again. This time, King Shang appeared in front of Lin Yuan's eyes. He was already standing on Zhaixing Tower, which was filled with rations and supplies. A huge fire soared into the sky. The wealth that Yin Shang had accumulated over the years and the resources plundered from the south were all burned in the fire. Suddenly, Lin Yuan seemed to see King Shang's soul appear on the ruined Zhaixing Tower, laughing wildly at the ashen-faced Jiang Zia and GFA. Without wealth and food, it meant that GFA's dream of conquering the world and ascending to the throne had been shattered. To appease Wu Geng, GFA even took the initiative to return Yin Shang's ancestral land and the remaining people to Wu Geng. He even conferred Wu Geng, who should have been exterminated, as a feudal lord. On the other hand, Yin Hong and Yin Jiao, the traitors, were killed on the spot to vent their anger. Finally, he sat on the throne that symbolized the supremacy of the human world. He looked up and saw the vassals who were as powerful as him, or even more powerful than him. For 800 years, GFA, Ji Gongming, Ji Yen, Datong, Western Zhou, and Eastern Zhou did not improve. Instead, their territories became smaller and their lives became worse and worse. In the end, they were destroyed by Qin's state. They still called themselves the Emperor of Zhou or the King of Zhou. In contrast, King Shang of Yin Shang before the Zhou dynasty and the first Emperor of Qin dynasty after the Zhou dynasty, how ridiculous was it? The picture scroll in front of him was destroyed. Lin Yuan slowly stretched out his fist. It was a simple punch. From the outside, there was nothing fancy about it. However, after such a punch was thrown, the 9 cauldrons were destroyed and the mountains and rivers were turned upside down. Bo Yikao's twisted face was still full of surprise, but he could not even react. He was directly blown into nothingness by this punch. This punch is called the Human King. The low and hoarse voice sounded again, and immediately, the huge power that was controlling Lin Yuan suddenly dissipated. At this moment, Lin Yuan only felt that his heart was empty, and he even had a feeling of wanting to cry. The Human King was the most supreme existence in the world. It could be said that when the Human King was angry, the heaven and earth would collapse. However, at the same time, the Human King was the most sorrowful existence in the world. Because what he said and did was for the longevity of the human race and the world. When he worked towards this goal, his former companions would become his enemies. Even his wife and children would eventually stand on the opposite side. Looking around, he only felt that everything in the world belonged to him, but he did not seem to belong to this world. Chapter 12:25. Lamentable, lamentable, pitiful yet respectable. The words a loner were the most suitable to describe the Human King. No one would understand him and no one would get close to him. Every person he saw when he opened his eyes every day was his enemy or a potential enemy. When he was sad, he did not even have anyone to talk to. He had to keep his eyes open even when he slept. This was because the Human King always knew that when he gave an order, he would fight for the interests of countless commoners and also infringe on the interests of countless influential officials. People would change. Especially those talents and scholars who kept saying that they would serve the country and the people. Once they were in the imperial court, what they said before would be no different from farts. Because at this time, they were no longer the poor students who had problems even eating. They were the influential officials who stood in the imperial court and at the top of the food chain in the imperial court. They could decide the life and death of countless people with one word. If the Human King wanted to fight for the interests of the commoners, the interests of these influential officials would be reduced. Even if some things did not belong to them in the first place, it would not stop them from seizing and making the things that they fancied their own. It was really tiring and lonely to deal with these people day in and day out. The scholars who were like-minded the day before became his new opponents the moment he put on the official's robe. Everyone in the world was his enemy. However, he could never stop. This was because as the human king, he had to promote the progress of the entire human race and make the human race stronger and stronger. Only in this way could he ensure that the main character of every era was the human race. He would not be like the three races after the beginning of the world, followed by the shaman and demon race after that. After that, he would directly withdraw from the stage of the world and be replaced by a new race. This is the human king? Lin Yuan murmured. He looked into the distance and said from the bottom of his heart, "May the human race exist with the world forever." Lin Yuan, why do you want the real spirit karma position map? Could it be? After everything was settled and he left the arena, the system appeared to communicate with Lin Yuan again. Lin Yuan let out a long breath. There was a faint smile on his face. As his eyes moved, it was like the stars were flickering. At the same time, far away in the void of space, a bronze coffin that floated in the endless sea of bitterness trembled slightly. A moment later, a loud laugh rang out from the coffin. With just this laugh, over a dozen minor worlds in the vicinity collapsed and collapsed. Countless living beings were crushed by the terrifying pressure, leaving only a wisp of Xiantian qi, which was then extracted by an invisible force. Just like the Xiantian qi of the other living beings, the Xiantian qi gathered into a milky white river and poured into the bronze coffin. The bronze coffin shook even more violently, as if the thing inside was about to break out of the coffin at any moment. At this moment, a jade-white hand extended out of nowhere and gently touched the bronze coffin. The vibration of the bronze coffin stopped abruptly. A white-robed young man with sword-like eyebrows walked out of the void and sat cross-legged on the bronze coffin. He looked in the direction of the Tianwu world and muttered, "Soon, soon. It's just that I don't know if you'll still." The voice gradually drifted away. The young man sitting on the bronze coffin had a faint smile on his face. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the sea of misery with the bronze coffin. On the other side, after obtaining the 3 lives stone and the true spirit karma position map, Lin Yuan's consciousness dissipated on its own. His vision turned black and then bright, and he returned to his main body in the Tianwu world. "Io, my Lord Dragon King, you're finally awake." The allied army formed by the outer sea monsters is about to reach this palace. The crab boss appeared in front of Lin Yuan with a frown. His aura was weak, as if he had been heavily injured. Even his Demon King realm was somewhat unstable, constantly jumping between the desolate Demon realm and the Demon King realm. Lin Yuan was certain that if the crab boss didn't recuperate properly, it wouldn't take long for him to fall from the Demon King realm. He might be stuck in the desolate demon realm for the rest of his life. What's going on? Lin Yuan raised his eyelids and looked at the crab boss. Boss Crab saw that Lin Yuan's face was full of indifference. Although he was anxious at the moment, he didn't know why, but his heart gradually calmed down. It seemed that as long as the black dragon took action, all the problems would not be a problem. Half an hour ago, the endless sea had suddenly been unsealed. The outer sea monsters had suddenly attacked and caught the dragon bloodline demonic beasts off guard. The two sides had then engaged in a fierce battle. The dragon bloodline demonic beasts had suffered heavy losses. If not for the help of a few ancestral demon ancestors, the dragon bloodline demonic beasts at the front line would have been wiped out. However, although the dragon bloodline demonic beasts had stabilized the defensive line, they had also left behind millions of corpses. The originally weak defensive line had once again become weak. Many outer sea monsters took the opportunity to break through the defensive line formed by the dragon bloodline demonic beasts and massacred the nearby sea regions. One of the groups of outer sea monsters didn't even stop and headed straight for the city of trade. Fortunately, these outer sea monsters couldn't use the teleportation formation to directly attack the city of trade. Otherwise, this place would have fallen long ago. Flood Dragon 1, Tai Mu, Cyrus, and the other experts of the City of Trade fought against the outer sea monsters. All of them suffered heavy injuries and were forced to retreat. Tai Mu even had 2 of his pincers broken by an outer sea monster that looked like an octopus. Even the crab boss, a merchant, had no choice but to fight a few rounds with the enemy. However, he was still forced to retreat. Now, they were only relying on the defensive formation outside the palace to deal with the enemy. However, if this continued, it would only be a matter of time before they fell. Therefore, the crab boss appeared outside Lin Yuan's palace. He wanted to see if he could awaken Lin Yuan and see if Lin Yuan had a solution. Got it? Lin Yuan replied indifferently. His eyes turned slightly, and a large amount of nether realm black water was secreted from his scales. When the nether realm black water fell to the ground, it turned into various black sea monsters. Without needing Lin Yuan to call them, they directly rushed out of the palace. Lin Yuan leisurely moved his body and followed behind these nether river sea monsters. He murmured, "The god-worshipping sect is much more narrow-minded than I thought." They seized the opportunity and directly rushed to the city of trade. Hee, do they really think I'm a pushover? The god-worshipping sect? The crab boss, who was following behind Lin Yuan, was slightly startled. A trace of fear flashed through his round eyes. It seemed that he had never imagined that the group of outer sea monsters that had set their eyes on the city of trade was actually the god-worshipping sect that was rumored to be strong enough to compete with the Dragon Temple. Chapter 12:26. In the chaos of the endless sea, no one knew what role the god-worship sect played. But strictly speaking, since the god-worship sect was a major force in the endless sea, it was impossible for them to go with the flow. As long as one wasn't a real fool, one wouldn't believe that the god-worship sect was simply invited by the outer sea monsters to help. But later on, things changed again. Because of the greed of the mutant, he lured the heavenly court into the situation, trying to provoke a war between the heavenly court and the god-worship sect so that he could eat the fat meat of the endless sea. Or rather, he wanted the guardian of the heavenly gate behind him to eat this fat meat. It was because of this greed that the god-worship sect and the heavenly court were still entangled, but the guardian of the heavenly gate represented by the mutant had already been kicked out of the game. The current situation was nothing more than the god-worship sect wanting to use Lin Yuan as a weapon to deal with the heavenly court, but in the end, they were defeated by Lin Yuan. Unable to swallow their anger, they turned around and cooperated with the heavenly court to attack the dragon blood monsters. After all, Lin Yuan's body was now in the endless sea. The city of trade and the foundation of the gray-scaled flood dragon people were also here. As long as the outer sea monsters could break through the defense of the dragon blood monsters, no matter what Lin Yuan thought, he would have to fight, and the god-worship sect would still be able to reap the benefits. But the god-worship sect had an untainted background after all, and knowing that the heavenly court was not to be trifled with, it was inevitable that they would have some doubts. At that time, whether or not the Church of Gods could have the last laugh would depend on how intense the battle between Lin Yuan and the heavenly court was. If both sides were in a killing frenzy, it would naturally be excellent if both sides suffered heavy losses. However, if the winner did not suffer heavy losses, then the plan of the Church of Gods could be said to be in vain. Therefore, before the heavenly court arrived in front of Lin Yuan, the god-worship sect had to make a series of emergency measures. For example, they had to force Lin Yuan into a dead end first. Just like now. Lin Yuan could conclude that at this moment, most of the demonic beasts outside the city of trade were under the command of the god-worship religion. Even if a few of them were kidnapped, they should be the original demonic beasts of the outer sea. No existence of the heavenly court participated in this assault. These bastards wanted to first destroy the city of trade and slaughter the gray-scaled flood dragon people so that Lin Yuan would be enraged and lead the dragon bloodline demonic beasts to fight to the death with the heavenly court. This was a very simple plan, so simple that it could be seen through at a glance. However, this was also considered an open conspiracy. After all, Lin Yuan had spent a lot of time and effort in the endless sea. He absolutely couldn't accept the result of leaving with his tail between his legs. Thus, Lin Yuan would definitely fight to the end. Lin Yuan's character was like that. Even if he didn't have a good time, he wouldn't let the enemy laugh at him. So what if Lin Yuan saw through it? If he wanted to take revenge on the House of Gods, he would have to deal with the Heavenly Court first. Even if the Heavenly Court couldn't just watch the God worship sect shrink back, the Heavenly Court was after all Hongjuan's subordinate. Their primary goal was to kill him, an existence related to Hongjuan's death tribulation. If the God worship sect really shrank back, the Heavenly Court would still have to step in. Even the Heavenly Court didn't really care about the Endless Sea. The reason they appeared here was not because of the strange man's request, but because they were originally here to deal with Lin Yuan. At this time, the Heavenly Court wouldn't casually fall out with the God worship sect. Because the God worship sect was really difficult to deal with, and Lin Yuan was just as difficult to deal with. If these two sides joined forces, even if the Heavenly Court didn't leave any trump cards this time, they still wouldn't have the confidence to defeat either of them. While thinking, Lin Yuan had already arrived outside the palace. The first thing he saw was the battle going on. According to the original design of the City of Trade, the main defensive target was actually the interior of the city. Although the four walls were made of willow stone, the reason why the willow stone Great Wall was able to withstand the endless flood of outer sea monsters was because of the elite dragon bloodline monster beasts guarding the Great Wall, and the fact that the Great Wall had an excellent array formation around it. If it was just a towering mountain pass, the enemy would have a way to climb over it. The City of Trade was originally not a war fortress. The four walls here were not so much for military purposes, but for a variety of expensive equipment that could be used in the depths of the Endless Sea. After all, who could expect the enemy to face a city with a transmission formation inside and still attack the city from the outside? Such an enemy probably didn't exist. If it did, there were only three possibilities. The first was that the enemy was so stupid that they didn't know what was good for them, and insisted on using their own bodies to test which of the willow stone walls was harder. The second was that they were quite confident in their own strength, and didn't need to resort to trickery, and could just crush the enemy head-on. Of course, there was also the last special case, which was that their relationship with the people in the Endless Sea was really too bad. Even if they wanted to take advantage of the situation, they couldn't enter the City of Trade through the transmission formation. Under the name of the Outer Sea Monster Beasts, the God Worship sect, which had temporarily organized the monster beasts, might have met all three of the conditions. Lin Yuan's gaze swept across the small battlefields, and he had a general understanding of the level of these Outer Sea Monster Beasts. The City of Trade had set up many residential areas to house the gray-scaled flood dragon people. In other words, rather than calling them residential areas, it was better to call them small strongholds that resembled military stations. All kinds of mechanisms and secret passages had been set up. When he was designing them, Lin Yuan's requirement was that even if the monster kings came to the City of Trade to cause trouble, they couldn't kill their way out of the residential areas within 4 hours without using the transmission formation. The small fries of the Outer Sea monster beasts below the Monster King realm were locked in a fierce battle with the gray-scaled flood dragon people in the residential areas. However, there were also about 30 monster kings who were madly charging towards the palace. After all, they had the advantage in terms of cultivation base. Even if the gray-scaled flood dragon people were well-equipped, they only needed to force their way in. Once they opened up a passage, the Outer Sea monster beasts they brought over would naturally entangle the gray-scaled flood dragon people who couldn't surround them again. Therefore, in general, although the Outer Sea monster beasts suffered more casualties, they were still advancing steadily. We're still lacking a lot of high-end combat power. Lin Yuan sighed. He coiled his body in front of the palace and looked at the approaching monster kings with an extremely cold gaze. The monster kings in the City of Trade were Cyrus, Tai Wu, and its two brothers, as well as Boss Crab. Originally, there were also the monster king experts from the Siren Guild stationed in the City of Trade. However, as the situation at the front lines worsened, they were also transferred away. Being able to hold off the army led by more than 30 monster kings with such strength was already a small surprise for Lin Yuan. However, this was still far from Lin Yuan's expectations. After all, the Outer Sea monster beasts, the Four Seas Dragon Clan, the Siren Guild, and even some large-scale siren clans could all bring out more than 30 monster kings. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.